Hello guys, welcome back to my new channel. Today we will see what if Harry Potter story. If you like the video, please leave like, share and comment and share with your friends. And let's start the video.
1st, 1981, was cold and unremarkable in Little Whinging, Surrey, which was precisely the sort of thing Little Whinging excelled at. The houses of Privet Drive stood in their tidy rows like soldiers who'd never seen combat, identical, pressed, and desperate to avoid notice. Every lawn was trimmed, every curtain was drawn, every cat had been let in for the evening, except one. The tabby cat sitting on the wall of number 4 had been there since morning, which would have alarmed the residents had any of them bothered to look at it properly. They hadn't. People in Little Whinging had an extraordinary talent for not looking at things properly. 2 streets over, in a cul-de-sac that the neighborhood association pretended didn't exist, a black touring car that appeared to be from roughly 1933 sat idling in front of a house that had been on the market for 6 years. The house wasn't haunted. The estate agent had insisted upon this with the frantic energy of a man who'd been asked the question too many times. There had been some incidents, a cold spot in the parlor, some screaming from the attic, a previous owner found gibbering in the garden about hands coming through the walls, but haunted. No, absolutely not. Bit of a draft, perhaps. Gomez Addams stepped out of the car and inhaled deeply, as though the damp November air of suburban England were a fine cigar. "Morticia," he said, his eyes shining. "Do you smell that?" Morticia Addams unfolded herself from the passenger seat with the fluid grace of smoke rising from a candle. Her black dress pooled on the pavement like spilled ink. She tilted her head, closed her eyes, and breathed in. "Despair," she said, with undertones of quiet domestic resentment. "Magnificent. The house, darling." "Ah, yes." Gomez turned to face the property. It was a squat Victorian thing, half swallowed by dead ivy, with windows like closed eyes and a front door that hung slightly ajar in a way that suggested the house had given up. He loved it immediately. "Lurch, what do you think?" From the driver's seat came a groan that could have meant anything from enthusiastic approval to existential despair. With Lurch, these were often the same thing. "My thoughts exactly." Gomez bounded up the front path with the manic energy of a man half his age and twice his caffeine intake. He'd been in England for 3 days, 2 spent in London arranging the purchase through the family's solicitors, 1 spent taking Morticia to the Tower of London, where she'd spent 45 minutes in quiet communion with the execution site, and then declared it the most romantic afternoon of my life, which had led to an evening Gomez would remember fondly for the rest of his days. The house in Little Whinging had come to his attention through Uncle Knick-Knack, who maintained a network of informants across Europe dedicated to tracking properties with what he called genuine spiritual character. The asking price was absurdly low. The estate agent had wept with gratitude on the phone. Morticia followed him up the path, her heels making no sound on the cracked flagstones. She paused at the threshold. "There's something here," she said. "The ghost." "No." "Well, yes, there is a ghost. I can feel her in the attic. She's quite agitated, but I mean here, in the air, tonight." Her dark eyes scanned the street beyond the dead garden. "Something magical happened today, recently. The residue is everywhere." Gomez had learned long ago to trust his wife's instincts about magical residue the way a sailor trusts the tide. He stepped back to stand beside her, and together they looked out at the silent, stupid street. "Celebrations," Morticia murmured. "Joy, relief, and underneath it, grief." "Something enormous died today, Gomez, and something enormous survived. Sounds like a party I'd have enjoyed. It was a magical event, wizarding specifically. I can taste the signature, wand-based British tradition." She paused. "We should investigate the house and leave." "Something about tonight feels pivotal." The house did not disappoint. The ghost in the attic was a Victorian governess named Miss Greatley who'd been bricked into the wall by a family she'd displeased and had spent the last 130 years screaming about it. She was livid. She was magnificent. Gomez offered to buy the house on the spot, and Miss Greatly was so startled at being addressed politely that she stopped screaming for the first time in a century and burst into tears. "We'll have the paperwork drawn up by Monday," Gomez told her, patting the wall she was embedded in. "You'll love the family. My mother will adore you. She's been looking for someone to haunt the English property." You want me here." Miss Greatly's transparent face quivered. "Want you? My dear woman, you're the primary selling point." They left Miss Greatly weeping happily into her brickwork and stepped back into the night. It was nearly midnight. The street was silent in that aggressive way that English suburbs managed, not peaceful, but suppressed, as though the houses themselves were holding their breath and hoping not to be noticed. That was when they heard the motorcycle. It came from overhead, which was unusual for motorcycles, and it was enormous, which was unusual for things that flew. It roared across the sky like a comet with an exhaust problem, banked hard over Privet Drive, and descended toward number 4 with the subtle grace of a falling piano. "Gomez," Morticia said, her hand finding his arm. "I see it, Querida." They watched from the shadow of the dead garden as the motorcycle landed with a thud that set off a car alarm 2 streets away. The man who climbed off it was roughly the size of a small building. He was carrying something in his arms, something wrapped in blankets, something tiny compared to his enormous frame, and he was crying. There was already someone waiting for him. An old man in robes of deep purple, with a beard that reached his waist and half-moon spectacles that caught the streetlight. He stood in front of number 4 with the calm authority of someone who owned the moment, and the tabby cat was gone. In its place stood a severe woman in emerald robes, and she was arguing. "The worst sort of muggles imaginable," the woman was saying, her voice tight with distress. "I've watched them all day, Albus. They're horrible." The boy, their son, was kicking his mother up and down the street screaming for sweets, and you want to leave. "It is the safest place for him, Minerva. Safe. He'll be miserable. He will be alive, and when the time comes, he will be ready." Gomez looked at Morticia. Morticia looked at Gomez. They had been married long enough that entire conversations could happen in a glance. This one went roughly. "They're leaving a child on a doorstep in November in Surrey, at this house. The one with the curtains that match, the very one. That's monstrous. It's worse than monstrous, my Amor." "It's boring." They watched as the enormous man, Hagrid, the old one called him, handed over the bundle with shaking hands and honked into a handkerchief the size of a tablecloth. They watched the old man place the baby on the doorstep of number 4, tuck a letter into the blankets, and step back. "Good luck, Harry Potter," the old man murmured, and then they left. The woman vanished in a swirl of robes. The enormous man kicked the motorcycle back to life and roared into the sky. The old man looked at the baby one final time, did something with a small silver device that made all the streetlights flicker back on, and disappeared with a crack. The street was quiet again. The baby lay on the cold stone doorstep, alone, a letter tucked against his chest like a receipt. Gomez Addams stood in the dead garden across the road and felt something he rarely felt, genuine, uncomplicated fury. "They left him," he said. "Yes, on a doorstep. Yes, like a package, like a bottle of milk." Morticia agreed, and there was something in her voice, a cold, dark thing with edges that Gomez recognized. He'd heard it only a handful of times in their marriage, and every single time someone's life had changed dramatically afterward. They crossed the street together. The baby was awake, which struck Gomez as remarkable. It was past midnight, freezing cold, and the child had apparently been flown here on a motorcycle and deposited on stone, and he wasn't crying. He was looking up at the sky with wide green eyes, as though the stars were putting on a show just for him. Morticia knelt. Her black dress spread around her on the pavement like a dark flower, and she reached into the blankets and lifted the child with the practiced ease of a woman who'd done this before. The baby turned those green eyes on her, and she went very still. "Gomez." "What is it?" His forehead. "Look." Gomez looked. There was a cut on the baby's forehead, fresh, angry, shaped like a bolt of lightning, and it was saturated with magic. Even Gomez, whose magical sensitivity was nothing compared to Morticia's, could feel it. a dark, oily wrongness radiating from that thin wound like heat from a brand. "That's dark magic," he said. "That's very dark magic. It's a soul wound." Morticia's voice was barely a whisper. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, never with fear, but with a kind of appalled fascination. Someone tried to kill this child with magic so dark it left a piece of itself behind. And the child survived. She held the baby closer. Harry Potter, because that was the name the old man had used, looked up at Morticia Addams and smiled. It was a gummy, toothless, unreserved baby smile, and it broke something open in her chest that she hadn't known was closed. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, you marvelous thing." "Tish," Gomez said, because he could see it happening, could see the decision forming behind his wife's dark eyes like a storm building, and he needed her to know he was already there. "I'm with you." They left him on a doorstep, Gomez. They did. To be raised by people who put matching curtains in every window, unconscionable. He has a soul wound that will need expert attention, dark magic in his blood, and the most extraordinary green eyes I've ever seen. He'll fit right in. Morticia stood, the baby cradled against her chest. Harry had grabbed a strand of her black hair and was holding it with the fierce grip that only babies and drowning men possess. He had not cried once. "We're taking him," she said. It wasn't a question, obviously. "The old man, Albus," the woman called him. "He'll come looking. Let him." "He's powerful, Gomez. That was Albus Dumbledore. I'm certain of it." The name meant something, even to Gomez, who'd had minimal dealings with the British wizarding world. Dumbledore, the great wizard, the vanquisher of Grindelwald, chief warlock, supreme mugwump, and various other titles that sounded increasingly made up. A man of enormous power and reputation, Gomez grinned. It was the grin that opposing lawyers had learned to dread, wide, bright, and absolutely unhinged with confidence. Querida. "My Amor, light of my life, we are the Addams family. We have 17 lawyers on retainer, a dungeon with a view, and your mother has a personal relationship with at least 3 entities that predate human civilization. If Albus Dumbledore wants to discuss custody arrangements, he is welcome to try." Morticia smiled. It was a small, sharp, devastating smile, the kind of smile that had made Gomez fall in love with her and had made several other people fall downstairs. "Then let's go home." She took the letter from the blankets as they walked back to the car. She read it by the light of the single working street lamp, her eyes moving quickly over the cramped purple handwriting. His parents were murdered tonight, James and Lily Potter. The killer was someone called Lord Voldemort. Voldemort, that's not a real name, that's a semester of bad French. He's dead, apparently, killed by his own curse rebounding off this child. The wizarding world is celebrating. She folded the letter precisely. They're celebrating, and they left the child who saved them on a cold doorstep in the suburbs. Not anymore, they didn't. Lurch opened the car door without being asked. He looked at the baby in Morticia's arms. He looked at Gomez. He produced a sound from somewhere deep in his cavernous chest that might have been approval. "Home, Lurch," Gomez said, "and step on it. We have a nursery to prepare." The car pulled away from Little Whinging with the low, satisfied rumble of a beast returning to its den. Behind them, the doorstep of number 4 Privet Drive sat empty in the cold November night. The letter was gone. The baby was gone. The only thing left was a slight depression in the blankets where a small body had lain, and even that would be gone by morning. Petunia Dursley would open her front door at 6:15 the next morning, find nothing, and go about her day with the comfortable certainty that nothing unusual had happened. She would never know how close she'd come to having a nephew in her cupboard. The universe had other plans. The Addams estate in Westfield, New Jersey, sat on a hill like a crow on a headstone, dark, angular, and giving the distinct impression that it was watching you. The house had been in the family for generations, and each generation had added something. A turret here, a gargoyle there, a bottomless pit in the basement that great-uncle Mordecai had installed for the acoustics. The grounds were perpetually overgrown, the trees permanently leafless, and the sky above the property maintained a personal overcast regardless of the weather elsewhere. It was, by any reasonable measure, a terrible place to raise a child. It was also, by every measure that mattered, absolutely perfect. They arrived home just before dawn, having taken a route that involved 2 continents and a shortcut through a dimension that Gomez preferred not to name in polite company. Harry slept through the entire journey, including the part where the car drove briefly upside down. Grandmama was waiting on the porch. She was always waiting on the porch when something important happened, as though the house itself whispered to her. She was a stout, wild-haired woman with the fashion sense of a Victorian séance and the magical ability of someone who'd been practicing since before most grimoires were written. She saw the baby and her eyes lit up like funeral pyres. "Who's this, Harry?" Morticia said. "He's ours now." Grandmama peered at the child. She licked her thumb and pressed it to his forehead, directly on the scar, and closed her eyes for 3 full seconds. When she opened them, her expression had shifted from delighted to something more complicated. "There's something in this wound," she said. "Something alive." "I know," Morticia said. "We'll address it. It's dark magic, old dark magic, darker than anything Mother." Morticia's voice was gentle but final. "We'll address it. For now, he needs a crib, a bottle, and to be inside a home that wants him." Grandmama looked at her daughter-in-law, looked at the baby, and made a decision that took about half a second. "I'll get the crib from the attic. The one with the skull headboard. Wednesday loved that one. Perfect." The household mobilized with an efficiency that would have impressed a military operation. Thing, a disembodied hand of uncertain origin and absolute competence, scuttled off to prepare a bottle. Lurch carried a crib down 4 flights of stairs without appearing to use any of them. Gomez made 3 phone calls in rapid succession. One to the family's primary attorney, one to their supernatural law specialist, and one to a contact in the British Ministry of Magic who owed the Addams family a favor dating back to 1743. By the time the sun rose, filtered through the perpetual clouds above the estate into a kind of grayish suggestion of daylight. Harry Potter had a room, a crib, a bottle, and a family. He also had a sister, though he didn't know it yet. Wednesday Addams was 5 years old and had been awake since 4 in the morning because she'd been conducting an experiment on the relative pain thresholds of her dolls. She was a pale, dark-eyed child who wore her black hair in 2 braids and approached the world with the focused intensity of a surgeon or a serial killer. When she heard unfamiliar crying from down the hall, Harry had finally broken his silence, objecting to the bottle's temperature. She materialized in the doorway of the nursery like a small, disapproving ghost. "There's a baby," she said. "Yes," Morticia said, adjusting Harry in her arms. "This is your new brother, Harry." Wednesday studied the baby for a long moment. Harry, who had been mid-cry, stopped and studied her back. They regarded each other with the mutual suspicion of cats meeting for the first time. "What happened to his head?" Wednesday asked. "Someone tried to kill him with very dark magic." "Did it work?" "No." Wednesday considered this. "Good," she said, and left. This was, by Wednesday Addams' standards, an effusive welcome. Harry's childhood in the Addams household was, by conventional standards, a catastrophe. By Addams' standards, it was idyllic. He took his first steps at 9 months, toddling across the living room floor toward a bear trap that Pugsley had left open. Morticia caught him 6 inches from the jaws, and Harry laughed so hard he hiccuped. He said his first word at 11 months, more. After Gomez tossed him into the air and caught him for the 15th time. His first sentence, at 18 months, was "Wednesday, no," which the family agreed showed excellent instincts. By the time he was 3, the household had settled into a rhythm. Harry was, in many ways, the easiest child the Addamses had ever raised, not because he was docile, but because he was game. Where Wednesday approached the world with analytical intensity and Pugsley with explosive enthusiasm, Harry met everything with a bright, curious fearlessness that delighted the entire family. He wasn't afraid of the dark. He wasn't afraid of the things in the dark. He'd toddle up to the most grotesque specimens in Morticia's greenhouse and try to pet them. When Kitty Cat, the family's full-grown lion, first wandered into his room, Harry grabbed 2 fistfuls of mane and tried to ride him. Kitty Cat, who had disemboweled furniture and terrorized mailmen for years, looked at Gomez with an expression of weary surrender and lay down so the toddler could climb on properly. "He's fearless," Gomez said proudly, watching Harry attempt to feed Kitty Cat a crayon. "He's an Addams." Morticia replied as though this explained everything, and perhaps it did. The household loved him. Thing developed a habit of following Harry around the house, ready to catch him when he fell or pull him back from ledges. Lurch, who communicated primarily through groans and the occasional chord on his harpsichord, composed a lullaby for Harry that was technically in a minor key, but somehow managed to be tender. Grandmama made him teething biscuits from a recipe that was older than most countries, and if they occasionally made his eyes glow faintly green, well, that was just the nightshade. And then there was Wednesday. Wednesday, who had tried to electrocute Pugsley on 3 separate occasions before his 2nd birthday. Wednesday, who maintained a graveyard for her dolls and held weekly funerals. Wednesday, who had looked at baby Harry that first morning with the detached appraisal of a coroner. Wednesday adored him. She would never have used that word. She would have denied it under oath and possibly under torture. But it was Wednesday who read to Harry every night, admittedly from texts that would have given most children nightmares for years. But Harry seemed to find Poe soothing and positively enjoyed Lovecraft. It was Wednesday who taught him chess at age 4, and who, when he actually beat her at age 6, didn't speak to anyone for 2 days, but left a new chess set on his bed carved from what appeared to be human bone. It was Wednesday who, when a boy at the park pushed Harry off the swings, tracked the boy down and did something so efficiently terrifying that the child's family moved to a different state. "Wednesday," Morticia said when the story reached her. "We don't traumatize children," he pushed Harry. "I understand, but we handle things with elegance, not 'what exactly did you do?'" Wednesday told her. "I see. Well, perhaps a touch less elegance next time." Harry, for his part, worshipped Wednesday with the uncomplicated devotion of a little brother who knows he has the most dangerous person in any room permanently on his side. He followed her everywhere. He sat quietly while she conducted experiments. He was the only person in the household, possibly the only person in the world, who could make Wednesday Addams genuinely laugh, which he accomplished by age 4 through the simple method of deadpan delivery of morbid observations. "Wednesday," he said one afternoon, looking at a dead bird in the garden with wide green eyes. "Do you think he's happy now? He's dead." "So, yes," Wednesday's mouth twitched. It was, for her, the equivalent of falling out of her chair with laughter. "You'll do, Harry." Pugsley was 3 years older than Harry and roughly 3 times his width, a cheerful, round-faced boy whose primary interests were explosives, eating and finding new combinations of the two. He appointed himself Harry's protector with the breezy confidence of a boy who could build a pipe bomb from breakfast cereal and wasn't afraid to prove it. "If anyone messes with you at school," Pugsley told Harry on his first day of kindergarten, handing him a lunchbox, "pull the tab on the bottom of the thermos." "What happens?" Smokescreen. "You've got about 4 seconds to run." "What if I don't want to run?" Pugsley beamed. "Then pull the tab on the top." Harry did not, ultimately, need the thermos. His first day at school was memorable for other reasons. The teacher, a well-meaning woman named Mrs. Henderson, asked each child to share something about their family. Harry, 5 years old and already possessed of the Addams gift for timing, stood up and said, "My father fights with swords. My mother grows man-eating plants. My sister knows 11 ways to kill someone with a pencil. My brother blew up the garage last Tuesday, and my grandmother talks to dead people." Mrs. Henderson laughed nervously. "Also, we have a hand that lives in a box." Mrs. Henderson stopped laughing. "His name is Thing. He's very good at poker." Harry was sent to the principal's office, which confused him because he thought he'd done well. Gomez showed up for the parent conference in a 3-piece suit, wielding charm like a broadsword, and by the end of the meeting had somehow convinced the principal that Harry's creative imagination was a sign of giftedness, and also donated enough money to the school to build a new library. The trick, old man, Gomez told Harry on the drive home, is to always be the most interesting person in the room and the most generous. People will forgive anything if you're fascinating enough and overlook everything if you're generous enough. What if they don't? Then you have lawyers. And if the lawyers don't work, Gomez glanced at him in the rearview mirror, then you have your mother. This was, Harry would learn, the most powerful threat in any Addams arsenal. The magical education began early. Morticia came from a long line of practitioners. Her family, the Frumps, had been steeped in the dark arts for centuries, though they practiced a tradition older and wilder than the wand-waving of British wizardry. Grandmama was a witch in the oldest sense of the word. Potions, hexes, divination, and a working relationship with forces that polite magical society pretended didn't exist. Harry showed his first sign of magic at 14 months, when he levitated Pugsley's entire collection of dynamite caps off a high shelf and into his crib, because he liked the way they rattled. The household treated this with appropriate celebration. Gomez opened champagne, Morticia smiled her devastating smile, and Wednesday observed that at least one sibling had inherited something useful. By 4, Harry was learning basic potion work alongside Grandmama, his small hands careful with the mortar and pestle as she guided him through preparations that most adult wizards would have found challenging. He had a natural affinity for it that delighted her. Steady hand. She'd say, watching him measure powdered asphodel. Good instincts. You've got the touch, boy, you feel the magic, don't you? Feel when it wants to turn, he did. He couldn't explain it any better than he could explain breathing, but he felt the moment when ingredients stopped being separate things and became something alive, something with intent. It was like hearing music that nobody else could hear. At 5, Gomez started him on fencing. Every Addams learns the blade, Gomez declared, presenting Harry with a rapier that was only slightly too large for him. The sword is not merely a weapon, it is an extension of the self, it is poetry, it is passion, it is pointy, Harry said, examining the tip. Exactly. Harry took to swordplay with the same fearless enthusiasm he brought to everything. He was small for his age, the legacy of his first year perhaps, or simply Potter genetics, but he was fast, fluid, and possessed of an instinct for angles that made Gomez's eyes light up. Parry. Riposte. Advance. No, don't think about it, feel it. Yes, there, did you feel that? I almost got you. You did more than almost, old man. You touched me. That's the first touch. We celebrate the first touch in this family. Gomez whipped off his fencing mask and pulled Harry into a fierce hug. Your father would be proud. He said things like this sometimes, references to Harry's other parents, always warm, always matter of fact. It had been Morticia's decision to tell Harry the truth early, and she'd done it the Addams way, without euphemism, without excessive drama, with absolute love. You had a mother and father named Lily and James, she told him when he was 4, sitting in her greenhouse surrounded by plants that occasionally reached for passers-by. They loved you very much. A very bad man killed them, and you survived. Your father and I found you afterward, and we brought you home. Why did the bad man want to kill me? We don't know yet, but we will find out. Are you my real mother? Morticia looked at him with those dark, fathomless eyes. Harry, I chose you. Your birth mother loved you so much that her love protected you from death itself. I love you so much that I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure no one ever hurts you again. We are both your real mother. Harry considered this for a moment with the grave thoughtfulness of a 4-year-old processing enormity. Okay, he said. Can I feed the Venus flytrap? Of course, darling. Use the long tongs, she's been snappish today. He never asked again. Not because he didn't think about it. He did, sometimes late at night, looking at the single photograph Morticia had managed to acquire of James and Lily Potter. A young couple waving from what appeared to be a garden party, radiantly alive and completely unaware of what was coming. But he didn't feel the absence the way another child might have, because there was no absence. The space where loneliness might have lived was filled entirely with the chaotic, dangerous, overwhelming love of the Addams family. At 6, Wednesday started teaching him what she called practical skills. These included lock-picking, escape artistry, basic sleight of hand, poison identification by taste and smell, 3 martial arts, and the ability to maintain a completely neutral expression while being interrogated. Why do I need to know this? Harry asked, hanging upside down from a rope while Wednesday timed how long it took him to escape his handcuffs. Because you're famous in a world we don't control yet, and famous people attract enemies. I'm famous, you're the boy who lived. The entire British wizarding world thinks you're a hero. You defeated a Dark Lord when you were a baby. I don't remember doing that. Irrelevant, they remember, and memory is more dangerous than magic. She watched him work the lock with a hairpin. Faster, you're thinking too much. You always say I don't think enough. About locks, think less. About people, think more. 30 seconds, Harry. He got out in 22. Wednesday nodded, which was her version of a standing ovation. At 7, Morticia sat him down in her study, a room of dark wood and darker books where the candles burned black and the shadows had texture, and told him about the scar. There is something in your scar, she said. A fragment of the man who killed your parents, a piece of his soul. Harry touched his forehead. Is it dangerous to you? No, I've spent 6 years studying it. Grandmama and I have contained it. It can't influence you, can't hurt you, can't grow. It's a prisoner, Harry, trapped behind walls of magic that your birth mother's love built and that our family's magic has reinforced. Can you take it out? Yes, when you're older and your own magic is stronger. The removal will require significant effort, but we have a plan. What if I want to keep it? Morticia raised an eyebrow. It was a gesture that had ended board meetings. Why would you want to know your enemy? Harry said, quoting something Wednesday had told him. If I've got a piece of him in my head, doesn't that mean I can learn about him? Morticia regarded her son for a long, quiet moment. Then she smiled, that small, sharp, proud smile. You are going to be extraordinary, she said. I'm an Addams, Harry replied, as though that settled it, and perhaps it did. The years unspooled like thread from a dark spool, and Harry grew. He grew into a lean, sharp-featured boy, with perpetually untidy black hair that Morticia had long since given up trying to tame, and bright green eyes that looked unsettlingly vivid against his pale skin. He dressed the way the Addams family dressed, dark, well-tailored, with a preference for black that was genetic at this point. He moved the way Gomez had taught him, fluid, balanced, always aware of the space around him. He spoke the way Morticia had modeled, precisely, with dry wit and genuine warmth in careful measure. He was, by age 10, an accomplished fencer, a competent potioneer, a fair hand at 3 forms of divination, fluent in French and conversational in Latin, capable of picking any lock manufactured before 1990, possessed of an encyclopedic knowledge of poisons and their antidotes. And able to play the harpsichord badly enough that Lurch had asked him to stop, he was also kind. This was the part that surprised people who expected an Addams to be all darkness and danger. Harry had inherited, or perhaps learned, a genuine warmth that sat comfortably alongside the macabre. He was the boy who brought injured animals home to Grandmama for healing. He was the boy who sat with Miss Greatly on her bad days and let her tell him about her life before the wall. He was the boy who noticed when Wednesday was having a difficult time, which she would deny until her dying breath, and left her favorite things outside her door without comment. A new scalpel, a book of medieval autopsy illustrations, a particularly beautiful spider in a jar, he soughed. Pugsley said once, not unkindly. He's strong, Wednesday corrected, in a tone that ended the conversation. On the morning of Harry's 11th birthday, July 31st, a day the Addams family celebrated with the enthusiasm they brought to all occasions, which is to say excessively and with controlled explosions. The letter arrived. It did not arrive by owl. It could not arrive by owl because the Addams estate's airspace was patrolled by a colony of bats that Grandmama had befriended in 1962, and that had since developed a taste for anything smaller than a hawk. Several owls had attempted delivery over the years. None had made it past the property line. The bats were thorough. Instead, the letter appeared in the mailbox, which was itself unusual, because the mailbox had been welded shut in 1987 after an incident involving a letter bomb from a disgruntled former business associate of Gomez's. Thing found it during his morning mail check. He opened the welded box with a blowtorch, which was his preferred method, and brought it to the breakfast table. Harry was eating pancakes that Lurch had made in the shape of skulls. Wednesday was reading the obituaries. Pugsley was doing something under the table that was producing a faint ticking sound. Gomez was fencing with an invisible opponent, because Gomez could not sit still, and Morticia was drinking coffee that appeared to be approximately the color and consistency of crude oil, a normal Addams morning. Things scuttled across the table and deposited the letter in front of Harry. It was made of heavy parchment, sealed with a crest in red wax, a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding a large letter H. The address was written in emerald green ink, Mr. H. Addams Potter, the skull headboard, bedroom, Addams Estate, Westfield, New Jersey. Harry picked it up and turned it over. It's from Hogwarts. Every head at the table turned, even Pugsley stopped ticking. Open it, Gomez said, lowering his invisible epee. Harry broke the seal and read aloud, Dear Mr. Addams Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September the 1st. We await your owl by no later than July the 31st. Today. Wednesday observed, sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Harry lowered the letter. There's a supply list. I need robes, a wand, a cauldron. We have about 30 cauldrons, don't we? 47, Grandmama said, but most of them are cursed. I also need a pointed hat. Barbaric, Morticia murmured. And I can bring an owl, a cat, or a toad. From somewhere in the house, Kitty Cat roared. A cat or a toad, Harry repeated firmly. Gomez had taken the letter and was reading the supply list with the expression of a man examining a restaurant menu, interested but prepared to order off it. Standard potions, kit, defense texts, transfiguration. This is all very traditional British wizardry. Wand-based, structured. He looked at Morticia. Thoughts, I think, Morticia said slowly, that Harry should go. The table went quiet. Wednesday set down her obituaries. The wizarding world believes Harry is dead or hidden, Morticia continued. Dumbledore has been looking for him, discreetly but persistently, for 10 years. He placed tracking charms, monitoring spells, blood wards keyed to the Dursley residence, all of which failed the moment Harry left that doorstep. How do you know he's been looking? Harry asked. Because I've been watching him look. I've had contacts in the British ministry tracking his inquiries since you were 2. He's been quite busy. She sipped her black coffee. He knows you're alive. The letter proves that the school's enchantments can find any magical child in the world. But he doesn't know where you've been or who's raised you. So we show up and give the old man a heart attack, Gomez said, grinning. I love it. We show up, Morticia corrected, and make it clear that Harry has a family, a powerful family. A family with resources, connections, and absolutely no intention of letting anyone, Dumbledore, the Ministry, or anyone else, treat our son as a piece on their chessboard. I'm going too, Wednesday said. Everyone looked at her. I'm 14. Hogwarts accepts transfers, and I've been expelled from every school on the eastern seaboard. I have magical ability. This was an understatement. Wednesday had demonstrated magical talent that Grandmama called prodigious and Morticia called concerning. Harry shouldn't go alone. I wouldn't be alone. There'll be hundreds of students, none of whom are me. Wednesday's dark eyes were flat and certain. I'm going. Harry looked at her. She looked back. Something passed between them, the wordless communication of siblings who'd grown up decoding each other's silences. I'd like that, Harry said quietly. Wednesday nodded once and returned to her obituaries. The matter was settled. Well then. Gomez leaped to his feet with the kinetic energy of a man whose blood was roughly 40% espresso. We need to go shopping. Robes, wands, books. Where does one buy these things? Diagon Alley, Morticia said. London. Excellent. We'll make a trip of it, the whole family. Gomez, perhaps a subtle, the whole family, Tish, will take the car, Lurch can drive, we'll stop at that torture museum you love in Kensington. Morticia looked at him, this manic, passionate, ridiculous man she'd married, and felt the warmth that his enthusiasm always kindled in her, no matter how many years passed. Fine, she said, but we're dressing appropriately. When have we ever dressed otherwise? Diagon Alley was not prepared for the Addams family. To be fair, very few places were. They arrived on a Tuesday morning in early August, emerging from the leaky cauldron in a formation that caused every conversation in the pub to stop dead. Gomez led, resplendent in a black suit that probably cost more than most of the pub's fixtures, his mustache sharp enough to cut glass, radiating the particular energy of a man who found everything delightful and slightly funny. Morticia followed, a column of black elegance that made the air itself seem to part for her pale face luminous in the pub's dim light. Behind them came Wednesday, black dress braids, an expression that suggested she was cataloging everyone's weaknesses, and Harry, dark-haired and green-eyed, wearing a black suit that was a miniature of his father's and looking around with undisguised curiosity. Pugsley had stayed home. He was in the middle of a delicate project involving nitroglycerin and had refused to leave it. Grandmama had stayed to supervise, which meant she was helping. Lurch brought up the rear and had to duck so dramatically to get through the pub's back door that several patrons crossed themselves. The wall, Morticia said, examining the brick barrier behind the leaky cauldron. Third brick from the left, second row up. Shall I? She touched the brick with one pale finger and the wall folded open. Diagon Alley blazed before them, a riot of color and noise and magic, shops crammed together at impossible angles, witches and wizards bustling between them, owls circling overhead, signs advertising everything from cauldrons to crystal balls. It was loud, chaotic, dazzling, and completely unlike anywhere Harry had ever been. He loved it. Where first? Gomez asked, consulting the supply list. The wand, Morticia said. Everything else is accessories. The wand is the instrument. They swept down Diagon Alley like a dark tide, and people stared. People always stared at the Addams family. It was practically a public service they provided, but this was different. This was the wizarding world, where people knew about dark magic and old families and the particular energy that clung to those who practiced the deeper arts. Morticia drew looks that were equal parts admiration and alarm. Gomez drew looks of baffled fascination. Wednesday drew looks that quickly became averted gazes when she stared back, and Harry, though nobody knew it yet, drew no particular attention at all, just a boy in a nice suit with an unusual family. The scar was hidden beneath his perpetually messy hair. The name was unknown. For the moment, he was invisible, and it was glorious. Ollivander's was a narrow, dusty shop that smelled of wood and ozone, and something indefinable that made the hair on Harry's arms stand up. The sign above the door read Ollivander's, makers of fine wands since 382 BC. And beneath it, in smaller letters, by appointment. A bell chimed as they entered. The shop was empty except for thousands upon thousands of narrow boxes stacked floor to ceiling on shelves that stretched back into shadows, and one very old man with wide, pale eyes who appeared from between the stacks like a spider emerging from its web. "Ah," said Mr. Ollivander, and his luminous gaze swept across the group and settled on Harry with an intensity that would have made most 11-year-olds fidget. Harry met it steadily. "I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Mr. Potter." The shop went very quiet. "Addams Potter," Harry corrected mildly. "And you knew I was coming. The wand knows. It always knows." Ollivander's eyes drifted to the rest of the family. They lingered on Morticia. "Morticia Frump, I remember your mother. She didn't use a wand, said they were training wheels. I was never sure if I should be offended or impressed." "Both," Morticia said. She meant it as both. "And Gomez Addams," Ollivander's gaze sharpened, "your family's reputation precedes you." "Usually at high speed," Gomez agreed cheerfully. "I don't believe I have records of any Addams purchasing a wand from this shop. We have our own traditions." Morticia said smoothly, Harry, however, will be attending Hogwarts, and Hogwarts requires a wand. Indeed it does. Ollivander turned back to Harry, and there was something in his eyes now, a gleam of professional excitement, the look of a craftsman anticipating a challenge. Well then, Mr. Addams Potter, let's find out what the wands think of you. He started with Holly and Phoenix Feather, which Harry found interesting because Ollivander clearly expected something significant from this particular wand. He presented it with a little too much ceremony, watched a little too intently. Harry picked it up. He felt the magic in it immediately, felt it the way Grandmama had taught him, not just as power but as personality. The wand was eager, hopeful. It wanted to connect, wanted to be chosen, and there was something in it that resonated with the thing behind Harry's scar. Which was exactly why Harry put it down. No, he said. Ollivander blinked. No, but give it a wave at least. It resonates with the fragment in my scar. That's why you brought it out first. The Phoenix Feather core is a twin, isn't it? Brother to the wand that gave me this. He touched his forehead. The silence in the shop was absolute. Ollivander stared at Harry as though seeing him for the first time. How could you possibly know that? The wand maker whispered. I can feel it. The wand wants me because of him, not because of me. I want a wand that chooses me. Ollivander's pale eyes were wide, and then, slowly, remarkably, he smiled. It was a real smile, the first genuine one Harry suspected the old man had given in years. Well, he said softly, this is going to be interesting. It took 47 minutes. Harry worked through wand after wand, rejecting some, being rejected by others, feeling the magic in each one and finding it wanting. The shop grew increasingly chaotic. Rejected wands had a tendency to express their disappointment, and by the 20-minute mark, several boxes had launched themselves off shelves and one wand had set fire to a curtain. Gomez was having the time of his life. Wednesday was taking notes. Finally, from the very back of the shop, from a shelf so deep in shadow that it seemed to exist in a different room, Ollivander produced a box that was older than the others. The wood was darker. The dust was thicker. I have never sold this wand, he said. I have offered it to perhaps 3 customers in 60 years, and it has refused them all. It was my grandfather's work, one of the last wands he made before he passed the shop to my father. He opened the box. The wand inside was dark, not black, but a deep, rich brown that was nearly black, like old wood that had spent centuries in shadow. It was elegant, unadorned, slightly longer than average. Ollivander said, 13 inches, and the core, he hesitated. The straw tail hair freely given. Morticia's eyebrows rose slightly. That's extraordinarily rare. It is the only wand in this shop with that core. The straw hair is temperamental. It is death-touched. It chooses wielders who have a relationship with death, that is, not adversarial. Harry picked up the wand. The effect was immediate and unmistakable. The air in the shop changed. The temperature dropped. The candles flickered, and for a moment, just a moment, every shadow in Ollivander's deepened and moved, reaching toward Harry like hands extending in greeting, and Harry felt it. Not the hungry eagerness of the holly wand, not the grudging tolerance of a dozen others, but recognition. The wand knew him. Knew the death that lived in his scar, knew the family that had raised him among graves and ghosts, knew the boy who petted lions and talked to spirits, and had never been afraid of the dark because the dark had always been his home. He gave it a wave. A shower of sparks erupted, not the gold or silver that most wand matchings produced, but deep violet, almost black, shot through with veins of brilliant green. They rained down like dark stars, and where they touched the floor, tiny flowers bloomed, black roses, perfect and beautiful, that lasted exactly 3 seconds before dissolving into shadow. Oh, Ollivander breathed. Oh my. That's my boy, Gomez said, and his voice was thick. Morticia reached over and took her husband's hand. Gomez squeezed back so hard his knuckles went white, because he was Gomez Addams, and he felt everything at full volume, and his son had just been chosen by a wand of death-touched yew, and it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. 7 galleons, Ollivander said faintly. And Mr. Addams Potter, take care of that wand. It has been waiting a very long time. I will, Harry said, and slid it into his sleeve the way Wednesday had taught him to carry a blade, accessible, hidden, ready. They bought everything else in a whirlwind. Robes from Madame Malkin's, where Harry stood patiently on the fitting stool and made polite conversation with a pale, pointed boy who introduced himself as Draco Malfoy and asked Harry his blood status within 90 seconds of meeting him. My birth parents were a pureblood and a muggle-born. Harry said, my adoptive mother comes from the front line, which has been practicing magic since before your family's ancestors figured out which end of the wand to hold. My adoptive father is technically a muggle, but he can kill you with a sword in under 3 seconds, and his legal team could dismantle your family's entire estate before lunch. He examined his reflection in the mirror. Does that answer your question? Draco Malfoy stared at him with an expression that couldn't decide between outrage and fascination. I'm Harry, by the way, Harry Addams Potter. Pleasure. He offered his hand. Draco, operating on pure social autopilot, shook it. I'll be at Hogwarts in September, Harry continued. I suspect you will too. I'd rather start as friends than enemies, but I'm comfortable with either. Your choice. He hopped off the fitting stool, collected his robes, and left Draco Malfoy standing in Madame Malkin's with his mouth slightly open. Outside, Wednesday was waiting. Who was that? Draco Malfoy, old wizarding family, blood purist politics, father probably a former follower of the man who killed my parents. And you offered him friendship. I offered him a choice. That's more than most people get. Harry grinned at her, a quick, sharp Addams grin. Besides, Wednesday. Keep your friends close. And your enemies closer, she finished. I taught you that. You taught me everything. Not everything. I haven't taught you how to kill a man with a tea set yet. We'll cover that next summer. The bookshop was next, Flourish and Blots, where Gomez became so enthusiastic about the selection that he bought the entire defense against the dark arts section. Plus several books from the restricted area that the shopkeeper insisted were not for sale, and which Gomez purchased anyway through a combination of charm, bribery, and what appeared to be mild hypnosis. Father, Wednesday said, watching him stack books on the counter. We came for Harry's school list. And we're getting Harry's school list, plus supplementary reading, plus reference materials, plus, oh Tish, look at this one, Unforgivable Curses and Their Medical Applications. We have that one, darling. We have the 1743 edition. This is the 1891 revision. The shopping was interrupted only once. They were crossing toward the apothecary when a witch in plum robes stopped dead in the middle of the alley, stared at Harry, and gasped. Merlin's beard, that scar, you're Harry Potter. The alley didn't exactly go silent, but a ripple of attention spread outward from the woman like a stone dropped in water. Heads turned, conversations paused. Eyes found Harry's forehead, where the wind had pushed his hair back just enough to expose the lightning bolt. Harry felt the attention land on him like a spotlight. He didn't flinch. He didn't shrink. He'd been raised by Addamses, and Addamses did not shrink from anything. Harry Addams Potter, he corrected for the second time that day, and you are. The witch sputtered, clearly not expecting the boy who lived to be a composed 11-year-old in a bespoke black suit who spoke to adults without a trace of deference. I'm Mathilda Grimsby, oh, Mr. Potter, we all thought, where have you been? Home, Harry said simply. The crowd was growing. People were pressing closer, craning to see, whispering his name like a prayer or a password. Harry could feel Wednesday tensing beside him. She had positioned herself at his right shoulder without him noticing, and her hand was inside her bag where she kept things that would make airport security weep. But it was Morticia who handled it. She stepped forward one step, that was all, and the crowd stopped moving. It wasn't magic, or at least not the kind that came from a wand. It was presence. It was the absolute, unshakable authority of a woman who had never once in her life doubted her right to occupy any space she chose. My son appreciates your interest, Morticia said, her voice carrying without rising. He is not, however, a public attraction. If you'd like to gawk, I suggest the zoo. It's south of the river. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have shopping to complete. The crowd parted. It didn't just part, it melted. People stepped back as though physically moved, their half-formed questions dying on their lips. Morticia swept through the gap with Harry at her side, Gomez and Wednesday flanking them, Lurch bringing up the rear like a walking barricade. "That was brilliant," Harry murmured. "That was nothing." Morticia replied, "Wait until we meet Dumbledore." They finished their shopping. They bought potions ingredients from the apothecary, where Grandmama's list was 3 times longer than Hogwarts and included several items that the shopkeeper had to retrieve from behind a locked door. They bought a trunk from a shop that sold enchanted luggage, and Gomez insisted on the model with 7 compartments, a built-in library, and defensive wards. Wednesday chose her own wand black walnut, 12 inches, dragon heartstring, with clinical efficiency. Ollivander said it suited her. He did not look happy about it. They did not buy owls. "We'll send Thing," Gomez said. "He's faster than any owl and considerably more discreet." "A disembodied hand crawling through the postal system is discreet?" Harry asked. "Nobody ever suspects the hand." They returned home that evening laden with packages and buzzing with the particular energy that comes from a day of discovery. Harry sat in his room that night, the skull headboard bedroom, which he'd loved since he was small, surrounded by his new things, and opened his school books one at a time. He read the standard book of spells, grade 1 in an hour, and found it elementary. He read a history of magic and found it dry but useful. He opened Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them and was delighted. He started The Dark Forces, a guide to self-protection, and laughed out loud at how much it got wrong. There was a knock at his door. He said, "Come in." Before realizing that Wednesday never knocked, she appeared, and Pugsley always knocked in a specific rhythmic pattern, and Gomez knocked like he was trying to break the door down. It was Morticia. She sat on the edge of his bed, which was something she rarely did. Morticia was not a casual woman. She didn't just sit, she chose to sit, and the choice always meant something. "Are you ready?" she asked. "For Hogwarts, I think so. For Dumbledore." Harry set down his book. "What should I expect?" "A very old, very powerful man who believes he is the only person qualified to make decisions about your life. He will be kind. He will be grandfatherly. He will try to make you trust him, and he will use that trust to guide you toward the destiny he has chosen for you." "What destiny?" Morticia looked at him for a long moment. The candlelight caught her eyes and made them seem bottomless. "He wants you to die, Harry." The room was very quiet. "Not immediately," she continued, her voice even. "Not cruelly, not callously. But the fragment in your scar, the soul piece, he believes the only way to destroy it is for you to sacrifice yourself. He has spent 10 years planning to raise you to be willing to make that sacrifice. A mistreated boy, desperate for love, grateful for any kindness, shaped by suffering into someone who would walk willingly to his death for the greater good." Harry absorbed this the way he absorbed everything, completely calmly, with the quiet processing that came from growing up in a family that discussed death over breakfast. "And you don't agree?" "I know he's wrong. Grandmama and I have been studying soul magic for a decade. There are other ways, harder ways, more dangerous ways, but ways that don't require my son's death." Her jaw tightened, and for just a moment, something showed through the elegance, something fierce, something primal, something that was just a mother looking at her child. "No one is going to sacrifice you, Harry, not while I breathe. And if Dumbledore pushes, then he will discover what happens when you threaten an Addams." Harry reached out and took his mother's hand. Her skin was cool, as it always was, and her grip was strong. "I'm not afraid of him," Harry said. "I'm not afraid of Voldemort either. I'm an Addams. We don't do afraid." Morticia squeezed his hand. "No, we don't." She rose, kissed his forehead, directly on the scar as she'd done every night since he was a baby, and left. Harry sat in his room, surrounded by his Hogwarts supplies and his Addams artifacts. The fencing rapier mounted on the wall, the potion kit from Grandmama, the lock-picking set from Wednesday, the slightly explosive chess set from Pugsley, the photograph of James and Lily Potter in its silver frame. He looked at the photograph. His birth parents waved at him, smiling unaware. He looked at the Hogwarts letter on his desk, that green-inked invitation to a world that thought he was a symbol, a hero, a weapon. I'm coming. He said softly, to the letter, to the wizarding world, to Dumbledore, to the shade of a man who'd given him a scar and a destiny. But I'm not what you're expecting. He turned out the light, and the darkness of the Addams mansion wrapped around him like a blanket. He slept perfectly. In the morning, there would be packing and planning, and the particular Addams chaos that accompanied any family undertaking. Pugsley would try to smuggle dynamite into Harry's trunk. Gomez would insist on a final fencing lesson for the road. Grandmama would press protective amulets into Harry's hands until he jangled when he walked. Uncle Fester, who had been suspiciously absent for 3 days, would arrive with a gift that he refused to explain and that ticked ominously. Thing would practice his long-distance crawling. Lurch would play something mournful on the harpsichord. Kitty Cat would hide in Harry's trunk and have to be extracted with a combination of raw steak and gentle coaxing. And Morticia would watch it all from her chair, a cup of black coffee in her hand, and feel the particular ache that every mother feels when a child is about to leave home, even if that child was armed to the teeth, magically gifted, psychologically unbreakable, and accompanied by his terrifying older sister. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, the Addams mansion was quiet, and the boy in the skull-headboard bedroom was dreaming of trains and castles and a world he was about to take by storm. He was Harry Addams Potter. He was not what anyone expected. And he couldn't wait. Chapter 2. The sorting and other trivialities Platform 9 3/4 was, in Harry's professional opinion, poorly designed. Not the magic of it. The magic was fine. A solid spatial fold that tucked an entire train platform into the gap between platforms 9 and 10 at King's Cross Station. Grandmama would have called it workmanlike. Morticia would have called it quaint. Harry called it what it was, a brick wall that you had to run at full speed and trust wouldn't smash your face in. I love it. Gomez said, eyeing the barrier with the expression of a man who'd just been told the buffet was unlimited. A wall you run through. It's like architecture designed by someone who truly understands the joy of property damage. It's a concealment charm layered over a fixed-point spatial bridge. Wednesday said, examining the brickwork with clinical interest. Crude but stable. Probably installed in the 1850s based on the magical signature. They haven't updated it since. The British wizarding world is not known for innovation, Morticia observed. She was drawing stares from every muggle in King's Cross, which was standard. Morticia Addams in a London train station was like a black orchid in a field of dandelions, technically the same category of thing, but operating on a completely different level. Harry leaned against his trolley, watching the flow of families through the station. It was September the 1st, 10:45 in the morning, and the trickle of wizarding families trying to look casual while pushing trolleys loaded with owls and cauldrons was both obvious and endearing. A red-haired woman was herding 4 children through the crowd with the frantic energy of a sheepdog, asking loudly about the platform number. A round-faced boy was being lectured by an elderly woman about not losing his toad. 2 girls were arguing over a textbook. "Shall we?" Harry said. "Together," Wednesday said, which wasn't a suggestion. They went through the barrier at a walk, not a run, because Addamses didn't run toward anything unless it was on fire and they'd started it. The brickwork shimmered around them like a heat haze and deposited them on the other side, where a scarlet steam engine sat gleaming under a wrought iron sign reading Hogwarts Express. Harry stopped. He took it in, the steam, the noise, the hundreds of students and families swarming around the train, the owls hooting, the cats prowling, the sense of collective anticipation that hung in the air like electricity before a storm. "Not bad," he said. "Adequate," Wednesday allowed. Gomez and Morticia came through the barrier behind them. Lurch followed a moment later, and the spatial fold made a sound it had probably never made before, a sort of strained groan, like a door being asked to accommodate a wardrobe. Several nearby families stepped back involuntarily. Lurch straightened his coat and groaned back at the barrier, which might have been an apology or a challenge. Right then, Gomez clapped his hands together. Let's get you settled. Where do you want to sit? Front of the train, back, on top. Gomez, they cannot sit on top of the train. Why not? Fester rode on top of the Orient Express for 6 hours, and he said it was. Fester also once ate a telephone. His judgment is not our benchmark. Harry was scanning the platform, cataloging faces and exits the way Wednesday had taught him. Most of the students were already aboard, hanging out of windows to wave goodbye to parents. A few older students moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of returning veterans. He spotted the red-haired family from inside the station. The mother was wiping something off the nose of one of the younger boys, who was enduring it with the mortified patience of an 11-year-old being mothered in public. "We'll find a compartment," Harry told his parents. "I'll write tonight." "Through thing," Gomez said. "He's already in your trunk. Don't let him out until you're settled. He gets motion sick on trains." A disembodied hand gets motion sick. We all have our crosses to bear. Morticia knelt, a rare gesture that always meant something important was coming. She took Harry's face in her cool hands and looked at him with those dark, bottomless eyes. "Remember who you are," she said, "an Addams. Remember what we taught you. Everything. And remember," she kissed his forehead, right on the scar, "you are loved completely by people who chose you." Harry swallowed around something tight in his throat. He was an Addams, and Addamses didn't cry, not from sadness anyway. Gomez cried regularly, but only from passion, joy, or particularly good swordplay. "I know, Mother." She released him and stood. Gomez grabbed him in a hug that lifted him off the ground and probably recalibrated his spine. "Give them hell, old man," Gomez whispered. "Give them worse," Harry whispered back. Lurch groaned, which was his way of saying goodbye, good luck, and please eat enough, all at once. Harry patted the enormous man's arm, the highest point he could reach, and Lurch produced a sound that was almost certainly not a sniffle. Wednesday had already boarded the train. She'd been gone for approximately 2 minutes, which meant she'd already secured a compartment through methods Harry preferred not to speculate about. He grabbed his trunk, mounted the steps, and entered the Hogwarts Express. The corridor was chaos, students squeezing past each other, trunks blocking the way, owls screeching, first years looking lost, older students greeting each other with the performative volume of teenagers who hadn't seen each other in 2 months. Harry navigated through it with the economical grace of someone who'd been trained to move through tight spaces since childhood, found Wednesday's compartment 3 cars back, and slid the door open. She'd claimed a 6-seater. She was sitting in the window seat with a book open on her lap, Advanced Interrogation Techniques Through the Ages, light reading, and she'd placed her bag on the opposite seat in a way that somehow conveyed, "This seat is taken, and if you touch this bag you will regret the decision for the remainder of your natural life." Harry sat down across from her, stowed his trunk, and exhaled. "So," he said. "Hogwarts, Hogwarts," Wednesday agreed, turning a page. The train lurched. Through the window, Harry watched the platform begin to slide away. Parents waving, a few younger siblings running alongside the train. Gomez standing stock still for once in his life with his arm around Morticia, both of them watching the train pull their children away from them and managing somehow to look proud instead of afraid. Then the platform was gone, and London was rushing past the window, and they were on their way. The compartment door slid open about 15 minutes into the journey. It was the red-haired boy from the platform, the one whose mother had been cleaning his face. He was tall, gangly, with a long nose and a smudge of something on his cheek that his mother had apparently missed. "Anyone sitting here?" he asked, nodding at the empty seats. "Everywhere else is full." Harry glanced at Wednesday. Wednesday did not look up from her book. "Help yourself," Harry said. The boy dropped into the seat with the graceless relief of someone who'd been wandering the corridor for 10 minutes. "Thanks, I'm Ron Weasley. Harry Addams Potter." Ron's eyes went wide. Then they went to Harry's forehead, then they went wider. "Blimey," he said. You're him, Harry Potter, Harry Addams Potter, and yes, you've really got the scar." Harry pushed his hair back, giving Ron a clear look at the lightning bolt. Ron stared at it with the unself-conscious fascination of an 11-year-old who'd grown up on stories. "Wicked," Ron breathed. Then he caught himself. Sorry, that's probably rude. Mum says I've got no tact. Your mum sounds perceptive. Ron grinned. It was an easy, open grin, the grin of someone who didn't overthink things and didn't have a deceptive bone in his body. Harry liked him immediately. This is my sister, Wednesday, Harry said, gesturing. Ron looked at Wednesday for the first time. Wednesday looked up from her book. Their eyes met. Ron's grin faltered slightly, the way a candle flickers when a window opens somewhere. Hi, Ron said. You have dirt on your face, Wednesday said, and returned to her book. Ron wiped his cheek. She's, friendly. She's Wednesday. You get used to it. Harry leaned forward. So, Ron Weasley. Tell me about Hogwarts. I've read the books, but books are just someone else's opinion bound in leather. Ron, it turned out, was a fountain of information, not the precise, academic kind, but the messy, lived-in kind that came from growing up in a magical family. He had 5 older brothers, all of whom had attended or were attending Hogwarts. Bill and Charlie had graduated. Percy was a prefect and insufferable about it. Fred and George were twins, 2 years above Ron, and were apparently legendary troublemakers. They once turned my teddy bear into a spider, Ron said, with the haunted expression of someone describing a war crime. I was 3. I've been scared of spiders ever since. Spiders are wonderful, Harry said. We had one in the attic the size of a dinner plate. Wednesday named her Charlotte. Charlotte, Ron repeated weakly. After the book, she was very literary about it. Ron decided not to pursue this line of conversation. He moved on to Hogwarts houses, which Harry already knew about but let Ron explain because the boy's perspective was more useful than any textbook. Gryffindor's the best, obviously, Ron said, with the fierce loyalty of family tradition. Everyone in my family's been in Gryffindor. I'll probably die if I end up anywhere else. What about Slytherin? Ron's face did something complicated. Bad, really bad. Every dark wizard ever came from Slytherin. You know who was a Slytherin? Not every dark wizard, Wednesday said without looking up. Grindelwald attended Durmstrang, not Hogwarts. He had no Hogwarts house. And dark is a relative term that the British wizarding establishment uses to marginalize magical traditions they don't understand or can't control. Ron stared at her. Wednesday turned a page. She's joking, right? Ron asked Harry. Wednesday doesn't joke. She makes statements of fact that happen to be terrifying. The compartment door opened again. This time it was a round-faced boy who looked like he was on the verge of tears. Sorry, the boy said. Have you seen a toad? I've lost my toad. His name's Trevor and Gran's going to kill me if I've lost him already. We haven't, Harry said, but come in, what's your name? Neville Longbottom. Harry's eyes sharpened slightly at the name. He'd read about the Longbottoms in one of the books Gomez had bought, Frank and Alice Longbottom, tortured into insanity by Death Eaters shortly after Voldemort's fall. Their son, raised by his grandmother, another child whose life had been shattered by the same war that had killed Harry's parents. Sit down, Neville, we'll find Trevor. Wednesday reached into her bag and produced something that looked like a compass but was clearly not. She tapped it twice, murmured something that might have been Latin and might have been older, and the needle swung to point down the corridor. Third compartment that way, she said. Under the seat, your toad is sitting on a chocolate frog card. Neville gaped at her. How did you? Magic, Wednesday said, in a tone that could have meant the literal practice or the colloquial expression or both. Neville scurried off to retrieve his toad. He came back 4 minutes later. Trevor clutched triumphantly in his hands and sat down in the compartment with the relieved gratitude of someone who'd found a lifeboat. Thanks, he said. I'm rubbish at this. Gran says I'm barely magical. She wasn't even sure I'd get a letter. Your grandmother, Wednesday said, and this time she closed her book, is wrong. Neville blinked at her. I can feel your magic from here. It's strong, stronger than most of the students on this train. It's just suppressed, locked down, probably trauma-related. She said this with the casual directness of someone reading a diagnosis from a chart. You've been told you're weak so often you've started to believe it, and the belief is choking your power. Stop believing it. The compartment was very quiet. Neville looked like he'd been hit with a plank. I'm not. You are. Your magical core is substantial. I'd estimate you're above average for our year, possibly significantly above average if you could get out of your own way. Wednesday opened her book again. Stop letting other people's expectations define your capacity. Neville sat there holding his toad, looking like someone who'd just been told the sky was green and was slowly realizing that maybe it was. She does this, Harry told him quietly. She's blunt, but she's never wrong about magical potential. If Wednesday says you're powerful, you're powerful. Aye. Thank you, Neville managed. Don't thank me, Wednesday said. Prove me right. The door opened a fourth time. This time it was a girl with bushy brown hair and an expression of intense, almost aggressive competence. She was already wearing her Hogwarts robes and had clearly been going door to door down the entire train. Has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost. Oh, she spotted Neville, who held up Trevor. You found him. Good. I'm Hermione Granger. I've already read all our textbooks. Have any of you tried any spells? I've practiced a few, and they've all worked for me, which I think is quite good considering I'm Muggle-born and didn't even know magic was real until my letter came. She said all of this in approximately 4 seconds. Harry was impressed. Harry Addams Potter, he said. This is my sister Wednesday, that's Ron, and you've met Neville. Hermione's mouth opened, closed, and opened again. Harry Potter. I've read about you in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century. All of which were written without my knowledge or input, Harry said, so take them with generous salt. But where have you been? The books all say you disappeared after that night. I was home, with my family, he nodded at Wednesday. Would you like to sit down, Hermione? You're making Ron nervous. I'm not nervous, Ron protested, looking nervous. Hermione sat. She studied Wednesday with the critical eye of someone who categorized the world through books and facts. Wednesday studied her back with the critical eye of someone who categorized the world through threat assessments. You said you've read all the textbooks, Wednesday asked. Twice. And supplementary material. Which supplementary material? Hogwarts. A history, obviously. An introduction to magical theory by Adalbert Waffling. Magical drafts and potions by Arsenius Jigger. The first 3 chapters are quite good, but the 4th is riddled with errors. You notice the errors in chapter 4, of course. The Moonstone preparation instructions are wrong. He has the pestle rotation backwards, which would reduce potency by at least 30%. Something happened that Harry had seen perhaps 5 times in his entire life. Wednesday Addams looked interested in another human being. Sit next to me, Wednesday said, and moved her bag. Hermione sat next to her. They began discussing potion theory with the focused intensity of 2 demolition experts comparing detonators. Ron looked at Harry with an expression of bewildered alarm. Are they going to be friends? Ron whispered. Worse, Harry said. I think they're going to be allies. What's the difference? Friends share secrets. Allies share objectives. Ron considered this. That's either the coolest thing anyone's ever said or the scariest. In my family, those are the same thing. The countryside was rolling past the windows now, green fields giving way to wilder land, forests and hills, and the occasional village that flashed by like a skipped heartbeat. The trolley which came by, and Harry bought enough sweets for the entire compartment because Gomez had given him a wallet that appeared to contain approximately the GDP of a small nation. Chocolate frogs, Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, pumpkin pasties. Ron looked at the pile of sweets on the seat like a man seeing an oasis. You didn't have to. My father says money is only useful if you spend it on things that matter. Food and friends count. Ron grabbed a chocolate frog with the speed of someone who'd been raised on packed sandwiches. Your dad sounds brilliant. He's completely insane. It's the best thing about him. They ate their way through the sweets while the train raced north. Harry learned that Ron's chocolate frog card was Dumbledore, the old man from the doorstep, here rendered in miniature, twinkling benignly from a small portrait. He learned that Bertie Bott's meant every flavor, including dirt, soap, and what Ron swore was bogey. He learned that Neville's toad had been a gift from his great-uncle, and that Neville would rather have had a cat. He also learned, from Wednesday and Hermione's increasingly intense conversation, that the Hogwarts curriculum hadn't been substantially updated since the 1960s, that the Defense Against the Dark Arts position was supposedly cursed, and that the current headmaster, Dumbledore, had held the position for nearly 4 decades. "That's a long time for one person to run a school," Wednesday observed. "He's the greatest wizard of the age," Hermione said, with the conviction of someone who'd read it in a book, according to sources he influenced. The greatest wizard of the age shouldn't need to run a school unless the school gives him something he needs. Like what? Access to every magical child in Britain, sorted into convenient categories for 7 years of their formative development. Wednesday's voice was neutral, clinically so. "It's an impressive system, if you think about it." Hermione frowned. It was the frown of a very intelligent person encountering an idea that didn't fit neatly into her existing framework. Harry watched it happen and saw the moment she didn't dismiss it, the moment she put it on a shelf for later examination instead of throwing it away. Smart girl, he thought. Very smart girl. The compartment door crashed open with considerably more force than any of its previous openings. Draco Malfoy stood in the entrance, flanked by 2 boys who appeared to have been assembled from leftover troll parts. His pale, pointed face was arranged in an expression of calculated superiority. "So it's true," Draco said. "Harry Potter's on the train." His gaze swept the compartment and landed on Harry. Something shifted in his expression, recognition. "You, from the robe shop, Draco." Harry didn't stand. "These are my friends Ron, Neville, Hermione, and you've seen Wednesday." Draco's eyes flicked to Wednesday. They flicked away faster than they'd flicked to her, which showed more survival instinct than Harry had expected. "Weasley," Draco said, with a sneer that had clearly been practiced in mirrors. "Red hair, hand-me-down robes, must be a Weasley. My father told me about your family." "More children than they can afford." Ron's ears went scarlet. "And Longbottom, grandmother still dressing you, is she?" Neville shrank in his seat. "And a muggle born." He said it the way someone might say cockroach. Hermione's jaw tightened. Harry sat very still. He let the silence build for exactly 2 seconds. Wednesday had taught him the power of a timed silence, and then he spoke. "Draco, I offered you a choice in the robe shop, friends or enemies. You seem to be making your selection." His voice was pleasant, calm. The kind of calm that Wednesday described as the silence before the scalpel. "So let me be clear about what you're choosing. These people are under my protection, not because they're weak, they're not, but because that's what I do. I protect my people. If you insult them, you insult me. And the last person who insulted an Addams," he tilted his head slightly. "Well, I'd tell you to ask them, but they moved out of state." The compartment had gone quiet. Even the trolley witch, who'd been approaching from down the corridor, had stopped. Draco's sneer faltered. Not because of the words. Words were just words, and Draco had been raised on them. It faltered because of the absolute, bone-deep certainty behind them. Harry wasn't performing confidence. He wasn't bluffing. He was stating facts the way you might state that water was wet or gravity was down. "You'll find," Harry continued, still pleasant, still calm, "that making enemies of the Addams family is a hobby with a very short shelf life. But making friends with us, that tends to work out well for everyone. The offer still stands, Draco. Think about it." He held Draco's gaze. Draco held his. The 2 boys behind Draco shifted uneasily, sensing with animal instinct that something had changed in the room's power dynamics. "Come on," Draco said finally to his flankers. He turned and left without another word. But he didn't sneer, and he didn't throw a parting insult, and as he walked away down the corridor, Harry could see his shoulders held just slightly differently, not defeated, but recalculating. "Bloody hell," Ron said, staring at Harry. "He'll come around," Harry said, "or he won't. Either way, he knows where we stand." "You think he'll actually come around?" Neville asked, looking dubious. "I think he's a 12-year-old boy repeating his father's lines because he doesn't have any of his own yet. Give him time, give him a reason to think differently. People surprise you." He glanced at Wednesday, usually in terrible ways but occasionally in good ones. I prefer the terrible ways, Wednesday said. They're more honest. The train moved on. The light outside the windows shifted from afternoon gold to evening purple. Students changed into their robes. Harry slipped his on over his suit. He'd had Madame Malkin tailor them in black with subtle dark green lining, because he was an Addams and even mandatory uniforms could be improved. Wednesday put on her robes with the air of someone donning a disguise. "You look like a student," Harry told her. "I look like someone wearing a costume. There's a difference. Most people won't notice. Most people don't notice anything. That's what makes them useful." The train began to slow. Ahead, through the gathering darkness, Harry could see lights, scattered at first, then clustering, then blazing into the shape of a castle that sat on a hilltop like a crown on a king's head. Hogwarts. It was enormous. It was absurd. It was 1,000 years of magical architecture piled on top of itself like geological strata. Towers and turrets and bridges and battlements, glowing with a warm amber light that turned the surrounding darkness into a frame. It shouldn't have worked aesthetically, structurally, by any sane principle of design, but it did. It worked the way the Addams mansion worked, by force of personality. "Not bad," Harry said again, but this time he meant it differently. "The castle is sentient." Wednesday said, studying it through the window. "Semi-sentient, at least. You can feel it. The wards are alive. They're tasting us." Harry felt it. A pressure not unpleasant, more like a large, curious animal pressing its nose against him, sniffing, deciding. The wards of Hogwarts, 1,000 years of accumulated magic, welcoming new students the way a host welcomes guests, with warmth but also with assessment. "Who are you?" The castle seemed to ask. "I'm Harry Addams Potter," Harry thought back, "and I'm going to love it here." The pressure eased. The warmth increased, and somewhere deep in the castle's ancient stones, something that might have been a chuckle rumbled through the foundations. The boats were charming. Harry had to give them that. Small wooden boats that moved by themselves across a black lake, carrying first years toward the castle while an enormous man, Hagrid. Harry recognized him from that night on the doorstep, though Hagrid clearly didn't recognize Harry, bellowed instructions from the lead boat. Harry shared a boat with Ron, Neville, and Hermione. Wednesday, as a transfer student, had been directed to take the carriages with the older students, and she'd gone without complaint, though she'd given Harry a look that said, "I'll find you inside," as clearly as if she'd spoken. The castle grew larger as they crossed the lake. Harry felt the wards intensify, not hostile, not even cautious now, but interested. The castle was paying attention to him specifically. He could feel it in the way the air moved, in the way the torchlight seemed to flicker toward him. "The castle likes you," Neville said suddenly, then looked startled at his own observation. "You felt that?" Harry looked at him with new interest. I don't know, maybe it felt like," Neville struggled for words, "like someone turned to look at you." "That's exactly what it felt like." "Neville, you've got better magical sensitivity than you think." Neville flushed pink to his ears, but he sat up a little straighter in the boat. They landed. They climbed stone steps. They were met at the castle doors by Professor McGonagall, a tall, severe woman in emerald robes who radiated the specific energy of someone who had been managing children for 40 years and had exactly zero remaining tolerance for nonsense. Harry recognized her too. The tabby cat from the wall. The woman who'd argued against leaving him on the doorstep, she recognized him as well. He saw it in the way her eyes found him in the crowd, a sharp intake of breath, quickly controlled, and then a professional mask sliding into place. But behind the mask, something complicated was happening. "Welcome to Hogwarts," she said, and her voice was clipped and Scottish and brooked no argument. "The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats, you must be sorted into your houses. The 4 houses are Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Your house will be like your family while you are here." "I already have a family," Harry murmured, too quietly for anyone but Ron to hear. "Your triumphs will earn you points, and any rule breaking will lose them. The sorting ceremony will begin in a few minutes. I suggest you smarten yourselves up." Her eyes lingered on Harry for a moment longer than necessary. He met her gaze and gave her a small nod, the tiniest acknowledgement, and watched her eyes widen fractionally before she turned and led them into the castle. The entrance hall was vast. The great hall was vaster. 4 long tables stretched the length of the room, packed with students, and above them, the ceiling showed a night sky so perfect that Harry couldn't tell where the enchantment ended and reality began. Candles floated in midair by the thousands. At the head of the room, on an elevated platform, the staff table stretched wide. And there, in the center, sat Albus Dumbledore. Harry found him immediately, the way you find a lighthouse in fog, not by searching but by the simple fact of his presence. The old man was exactly as Harry remembered from that November night, except more. More beard, more twinkle, more of that indefinable quality that made the air around him feel curated, as though even the light was performing. Dumbledore's eyes found Harry at the same moment. Blue eyes, sharp as surgical instruments behind those half-moon spectacles. They locked onto Harry with an intensity that the twinkle couldn't quite disguise. Harry smiled at him. A friendly, open, Addams smile, the kind that Gomez deployed when he wanted someone to underestimate him. Warm. Disarming. And absolutely, completely deliberate. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. That was all. But Harry saw it and filed it away. You expected a frightened orphan, Harry thought. Surprise. McGonagall placed a stool at the front of the hall. On the stool she placed a hat, ancient, patched, beaten, and possessed of the general appearance of something a particularly unkempt scarecrow had rejected. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a rip near the brim opened like a mouth, and the hat began to sing. It sang about the 4 houses, their virtues, and their founders, in a voice that was surprisingly good for a piece of haberdashery. Gryffindor valued bravery, Ravenclaw valued wit, Hufflepuff valued loyalty, Slytherin valued ambition. The song was cheerful and largely uninformative, like a tourism brochure set to music. "It's a hat," Ron whispered, as though confirming this to himself. "We've just got to try on a hat. Fred said we had to wrestle a troll. Fred sounds entertaining. Fred's a menace." The sorting began. McGonagall unrolled a scroll and began calling names. Abbott, Hannah went to Hufflepuff. Bones, Susan went to Hufflepuff. Boot, Terry went to Ravenclaw. Each student sat on the stool, placed the hat on their head, and after a pause that ranged from seconds to minutes, the hat shouted a house name and the corresponding table erupted. Then, "Addams Potter, Harry." The hall went silent, not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses against your eardrums, that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. 500 students and several dozen staff members all turned to look at the boy who stepped forward. Harry walked to the stool the way Gomez had taught him to walk into a room, like he owned it, not aggressively, but with the easy confidence of someone who was exactly where he was supposed to be. He sat. He picked up the hat. He placed it on his head, and the world went dark. "Well, well, well," said a voice in his head. It was old, amused, and slightly dusty. "Harry Potter, or should I say Harry Addams Potter. Now this is interesting. Hello," Harry thought. "In 1,000 years I've sorted 10,000 students. I've never encountered a mind quite like yours. You're layered, the Potter heritage, courage, loyalty, stubbornness, but overlaid with something else entirely, something darker, richer, more complex. I'm an Addams, so I see, so I see." The hat chuckled. "Let me look. Oh my, fencing since age 5, poison since age 4. Lock-picking, martial arts, strategic thinking. You've been trained like an assassin, child. I prefer comprehensively educated. And underneath all of that, kindness, genuine kindness. You brought injured animals to your grandmother. You sat with a ghost on her bad days. You left gifts for your sister when she was struggling. There's a warmth in you that all the darkness in the world couldn't smother. My family is dark. My family is warm. The two aren't mutually exclusive." "No," the hat agreed. "They're not. And that's what makes you so difficult to sort. Gryffindor claims you by blood. Your parents were lions through and through, and your courage is real. You walked into this hall without a flicker of fear, and you looked Albus Dumbledore in the eye and smiled. That takes the kind of bravery most people only dream about. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the don't quote platitudes at me, boy. I invented most of them. The hat's voice sharpened with amusement. Ravenclaw wants you too, that mind of yours, trained by a family of scholars and eccentrics. You read your first-year textbooks in an evening and found them elementary. You'd flourish there, but you're not driven by knowledge for its own sake. You learn because learning is useful, not because it's beautiful. A subtle distinction, but I've had 1,000 years to appreciate subtlety. The hat paused. Hufflepuff sees your loyalty, my word, your loyalty. The things you would do for your family, for your friends. Hufflepuff would make you very happy, and Slytherin, a longer pause. Slytherin sees everything else. The ambition, the cunning, the willingness to play the long game. You offered Draco Malfoy friendship, not out of naivety, but out of strategy. You see the value in turning potential enemies into allies. You sat in that train compartment and built a coalition without any of them realizing it. You're 11 years old and you think like a chess player. My sister taught me chess, your sister terrifies me, and I'm a hat. Another chuckle. So where do I put you, Harry Addams Potter? The boy who could belong anywhere. Harry was quiet for a moment, a real moment, not performed. He thought about his mother's words, remember who you are. He thought about Gomez's joy. He thought about Wednesday's fierce, unspoken love. He thought about James and Lily Potter, smiling and waving in that photograph and the house they'd belonged to. Where do I want to be? He thought, that's the right question. Most students never think to ask it. Gryffindor, my birth parents were there. I'd like to walk the same halls they did. And honestly, he felt a grin forming, an Addams grin, sharp and bright. I think Gryffindor could use some shaking up. Oh, you'll shake them up, you'll shake everything up. I almost feel sorry for the staff. The hat's voice warmed. Very well, Mr. Addams Potter. It's been a genuine pleasure. Give them hell. That's what my father said, wise man. And the hat, which had been sitting on Harry's head for nearly 4 minutes, the longest sorting in recent memory, opened its rip of a mouth and bellowed. Gryffindor. The Gryffindor table exploded. Cheers, shouts, stamping feet, Fred and George Weasley chanting, we got Potter, we got Potter. Harry removed the hat, set it back on the stool, and walked to the Gryffindor table with the easy stride of someone who just had a pleasant conversation and was looking forward to dinner. He caught Dumbledore's eye as he sat down. The old man was clapping politely, but his expression was complicated, relief and calculation and something that might have been concern, all layered beneath that grandfatherly twinkle. Harry raised an eyebrow at him. Just a fraction, just enough. I see you, the gesture said. And you don't know what to do about it. Dumbledore's clapping faltered for half a beat. Then the twinkle intensified and he looked away. The sorting continued. Hermione went to Gryffindor. She practically sprinted to the table, beaming. Neville went to Gryffindor after a long deliberation that left him looking stunned and grateful. Ron went to Gryffindor instantly, the hat barely touching his head before it shouted. Draco went to Slytherin, obviously, but as he walked to his table, his gaze drifted to Harry for just a moment, and Harry gave him a nod that said the offer stands. Then McGonagall called a name that wasn't on anyone's expected list, Addams, Wednesday. A ripple of confusion went through the hall. Wednesday stood from where she'd been sitting at the end of the staff table. McGonagall had placed her there as a transfer student, and she'd spent the entire sorting cataloging the teachers with the focused attention of a field biologist studying a new ecosystem. She walked to the stool. She sat. She placed the hat on her head 2 seconds. The hat was on her head for 2 seconds, then it screamed, not shouted, screamed. The sound that came from the sorting hat was unlike anything it had ever produced. A raw, ragged, existentially alarmed shriek that echoed off the enchanted ceiling and made several first-years grab each other. Slytherin, the hat screamed. Slytherin, for the love of all that is holy, Slytherin, get her away from me. Wednesday removed the hat, placed it on the stool with delicate precision, and walked to the Slytherin table in absolute silence. Every eye in the hall followed her. The Slytherin table looked as though someone had just delivered a live tiger to their doorstep and told them it was their problem now. Wednesday sat down. She smoothed her robes. She looked at the horrified Slytherin students around her and said, in a voice that carried perfectly in the stunned silence. "I look forward to getting to know you all." Several students physically recoiled. Draco Malfoy, sitting 3 seats away, stared at her with an expression that combined terror and fascination in roughly equal measure. At the Gryffindor table, Harry bit the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing. Across the hall, he caught Wednesday's eye. She gave him the smallest possible nod. They were in. Different houses, different tables, but that didn't matter. The Addams family didn't need to be in the same room to be on the same side. Dumbledore stood to give his start-of-term speech. He said nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak, and sat down again, and food appeared on the tables with the theatrical abundance of a magic trick designed by someone who'd never heard the word restraint. "Is he always like that?" Harry asked Percy Weasley, who was sitting nearby with the rigid posture of a boy who'd been born middle-aged. "Professor Dumbledore is a genius," Percy said, in the tone of someone reciting a fact. "A bit eccentric, perhaps, but eccentric is one word for it." Harry loaded his plate. The food was excellent, heavy, English, hearty, and completely unlike anything Lurch made, which was usually more adventurous and occasionally alive. "What about the other teachers?" Percy gave him a rundown. "McGonagall, Transfiguration, strict, fair, not to be crossed. Flitwick, charms, brilliant, tiny, former dueling champion. Sprout, herbology, warm, earthy, literal. Binns, history of magic, dead, boring, possibly unaware he died. Quirrell, defense against the dark arts, new, nervous, wore a turban. What about him?" Harry nodded toward the staff table, where a man with black hair, a hooked nose, and an expression of profound displeasure was staring at Harry with undisguised hostility. "Professor Snape, potions, head of Slytherin." Percy's voice dropped. "He's not pleasant. Favors his own house, takes points from everyone else, especially Gryffindor." Harry studied Snape. The man was staring at him with an intensity that went beyond ordinary dislike. There was something personal in it, something raw. Their eyes met, and Harry felt a pressure against his mind, subtle, probing, like fingers trying a locked door. Legilimency. Someone was trying to read his thoughts. Harry smiled at Snape and slammed his mental defenses shut with the decisive force of a portcullis dropping. Wednesday had spent 2 years teaching him occlumency. Or rather, the Addams family version of it, which didn't just block intrusion but made the experience unpleasant for the intruder. Snape's probe hit Harry's mental walls and bounced, and Harry watched the potion's master flinch, actually flinch, as though he'd touched a hot stove. "Stay out of my head," Harry thought pleasantly, maintaining eye contact in his smile. "Or next time I'll let Wednesday's traps do the talking." Snape looked away first. His face had gone, if possible, even more sour. But there was something new in his expression, not just hostility but a grudging, furious recalculation. "Is Snape always that friendly?" Harry asked Percy. "That's actually him in a good mood. Wonderful." The feast wound down. Dumbledore stood again and delivered actual announcements this time. The third-floor corridor on the right-hand side was out of bounds to anyone who didn't wish to die a very painful death. The Forbidden Forest was forbidden, and Mr. Filch wanted everyone to know that magic was not permitted in the corridors between classes. "The third floor is out of bounds," Harry said, perking up. "Because of a painful death. Don't even think about it," Percy warned. Harry grinned. He was absolutely thinking about it. A forbidden corridor with a death warning was basically a personalized invitation to an Addams. The Gryffindors followed Percy up shifting staircases and through portrait-lined corridors to the Gryffindor common room, which was hidden behind the portrait of a large woman who demanded a password. The common room was warm, round, and decorated in red and gold, with squashy armchairs and a fire that crackled with more enthusiasm than was strictly natural. Harry liked it. It wasn't the Addams mansion, nothing was, but it had personality. Character. The kind of lived-in warmth that came from decades of students making it their own. "Boys' dormitories up the stairs to the right," Percy announced. "Girls to the left. Your belongings have been brought up. Breakfast is at 7, don't be late." Harry climbed the spiral staircase to the first-year boys' dormitory, which he would be sharing with Ron, Neville, Seamus Finnegan, and Dean Thomas. 5 four-poster beds with red curtains, 5 trunks. 5 boys who were strangers 12 hours ago and would be living together for the next 7 years. Harry's trunk was at the far end of the room. He opened it, and things scuttled out, looking distinctly green around around the general area where a face would be if he had one. The hand wobbled to the bedside table, collapsed dramatically, and gave a thumbs down. Motion sickness, Harry explained to Ron, who was staring at Thing with the expression of someone whose reality had just expanded uncomfortably. He'll be fine in an hour. That's a hand. That's Thing. He's family. Ron opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Your family is mental, thank you. Ron laughed, a real, startled, genuine laugh, and shook his head. You know what, Harry, I think this year's going to be interesting. Ron, I absolutely guarantee it. The first week of classes confirmed several things Harry had suspected about Hogwarts. First, the magical education was solid but conservative. Everything was wand-based, structured, and followed a curriculum that hadn't been substantially updated in decades. This wasn't necessarily bad, the fundamentals mattered and Hogwarts taught them well, but it meant that Harry's Addams supplemented education put him considerably ahead of his peers. Second, the teachers were a mixed bag, some were excellent, some were adequate, one was dead. Third, Hogwarts had absolutely no idea what to do with him. Transfiguration was first. McGonagall started the lesson as a cat sitting on her desk, an impressive piece of showmanship that drew gasps from most of the class and a murmured, I prefer snakes, but the technique is solid. From Harry that made McGonagall the cat's ears twitch. She transformed back, gave her speech about transfiguration being dangerous and complex and not to be trifled with, and set them to turning matches into needles. Most of the class struggled. Hermione got hers to go silver and pointy after 20 minutes of intense concentration. Harry looked at his match. He felt the magic in it, felt the structure of the wood, the potential for change, the way transfiguration worked at the fundamental level, reshaping one reality into another. He thought about what Grandmama had taught him about transformation magic, about finding the thing inside the thing and convincing it to become what it already wanted to be. He tapped the match with his wand. It became a needle, a perfect, gleaming silver needle, on his first try. McGonagall came over. She picked up the needle. She examined it from every angle. She looked at Harry with an expression that was trying very hard to be professionally neutral and not entirely succeeding. Mr. Addams Potter, Professor, this is flawless, thank you. You've done transfiguration before. Not wand-based transfiguration, but I've studied transformation theory since I was 6. My grandmother has strong opinions about the relationship between intent and material reality. McGonagall set the needle down. Something moved behind her eyes, something that wasn't just academic admiration, but something older, more personal. She'd known James and Lily. She'd argued against leaving Harry on that doorstep. 10 points to Gryffindor, she said. And Mr. Addams Potter, I'd like to see you after class. Of course, Professor. After class, in her office, McGonagall sat behind her desk and studied Harry with the sharp, searching gaze of a woman who'd been teaching for 40 years and thought she'd seen everything. Where have you been, Mr. Addams Potter? Home, Professor, with my family. The Addams family. She said it carefully, as though tasting the words. I'll confess, when I saw the name on the enrollment, Professor Dumbledore was surprised. I imagine he was. He's been looking for you for 10 years. I know. Something about Harry's calm certainty made McGonagall pause. She pressed her lips together, that thin line that Harry would come to recognize as her processing expression. Your parents were my students, she said, and her voice shifted, still professional, but with undercurrents of something deeper. 2 of my favorites, though I'd deny it under Veritaserum. James was brilliant and infuriating in equal measure. Lily was the most talented witch of her generation. She looked at Harry with eyes that were seeing ghosts. You have her eyes, so I'm told. You have his confidence. Possibly more of it. A pause. You transfigured that match on your first attempt. First-year students don't do that. Most 7th-year students can't produce results that clean. My education has been thorough, I gathered. She folded her hands on her desk. Professor Dumbledore will want to speak with you. I expect he will. I am telling you this not as his deputy, but as someone who cared about your parents. Be careful with Albus. He is a good man, but good men can be blinded by their own goodness. Harry looked at her, really looked at her, the way Wednesday had taught him to read people, looking past the surface to the structure beneath. He saw a woman who was loyal but not blind, who served Dumbledore but did not worship him, who had argued to protect a baby on a cold night and lost. Thank you, Professor, he said. That means more than you know. She nodded briskly, professionalism snapping back into place. Off you go, and Mr. Addams, Potter, try not to show off too much. It unsettles the other students. I'll do my best, Professor. Your best terrifies me. You should meet my sister. I have. She reduced Professor Binns to tears in her first history of magic class, and he's been dead for 40 years. Harry grinned. That sounds like Wednesday. Charms was next on the timetable, taught by tiny Professor Flitwick, who fell off his stack of books when he reached Harry's name on the roll call. Harry caught him, not with magic, just with fast reflexes, and Flitwick spent the rest of the lesson treating Harry with the delighted warmth of a man who just discovered a new favorite student. The charm was Wingardium Leviosa. Harry had been levitating things since he was 14 months old. He levitated his feather on the first try then, because Flitwick was clearly enjoying himself, levitated everyone else's feathers simultaneously, floating them in a lazy spiral above the class like a flock of very confused birds. Oh, marvelous, Flitwick squeaked, clapping his tiny hands. Wonderful control, Mr. Addams, Potter. 20 points to Gryffindor. Hermione, who had been about to successfully levitate her own feather, gave Harry a look that was equal parts admiration and competitive fire. Harry caught her eye and mouthed, "Your turn." And she attacked the charm with renewed determination and had her feather floating within 30 seconds. Ron's feather caught fire. This was apparently standard. Herbology was taught by Professor Sprout, a dumpy woman who was more earth than person. Harry liked her. Neville loved her. The moment they stepped into the greenhouse, something happened to Neville. The nervous, apologetic boy straightened up, his hands steadied, and he answered Sprout's questions with a quiet confidence that made Harry want to stand up and applaud. "See," Harry murmured to Hermione as Neville carefully repotted a plant that was trying to bite everyone else. He just needed the right environment. Wednesday was right about him, Hermione murmured back. Wednesday is always right. It's her most annoying quality. History of Magic was, as advertised, being taught by a ghost who appeared unaware that he died and delivered lectures in a monotone that could have been weaponized. Harry spent the period writing a letter to his parents via Thing, who had recovered from his motion sickness and was eager to be useful, and studying the other students. He was mapping the social dynamics, who talked to who avoided whom, which alliances were forming, which tensions were building. Addams training. Wednesday's voice in his head, every room is a battlefield. Every person is a piece. Know the board before you play. And then on Friday there was potions. The dungeons were cold, dark, and smelled of preserved things. Harry loved them immediately. They reminded him of Grandmama's workshop, minus the personal touches. The students sat at stone work tables, their cauldrons ready, and waited. Snape entered like a verdict. The door crashed open, his black robes billowing, and he stalked to the front of the classroom with the controlled fury of a man who hated everything about his current situation, but channeled that hatred into dramatic exits and entrances. He took roll call. He paused at Harry's name, a long, deliberate pause, loaded with the kind of theatrical contempt that Harry recognized as performance. "Ah, yes," Snape said, his voice soft and dangerous. "Harry Potter, our new celebrity." A few Slytherins sniggered. Harry said nothing. He watched. He waited. Snape's black eyes locked onto him with the intensity of a man staring into a mirror and hating what he saw. "Tell me, Potter, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" The room tensed. This was clearly not a first-year question. Hermione's hand shot into the air. "The draft of living death," Harry said, without hesitation. Though the standard recipe is flawed, the clockwise stir pattern in step 7 should be counterclockwise, and the asphodel needs to be harvested during the new moon for full potency. Arsenius Jigger got it wrong in his textbook. Page 212 if you'd like to check. Silence. Absolute ringing silence. Snape's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes, a recalculation, rapid and reluctant. "Where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar?" Snape pressed. "The stomach of a goat, though the best ones come from the alpine ibex specifically. We keep several at home. My grandmother uses them in her antidote work." "And what is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane?" "They're the same plant, also called aconite, genus Aconitum, family Ranunculaceae. The root is the most toxic part. We grow it in our garden, though Mother keeps it separate from the entertaining herbs." Harry paused, then added mildly, "Would you like to continue, Professor, or shall we start the actual lesson?" The sniggering from the Slytherin inside had stopped entirely. Several students were staring at Harry with expressions that ranged from awe to alarm. Hermione had lowered her hand and was watching the exchange with the rapt attention of a spectator at a particularly intense tennis match. Snape stared at Harry for a long, terrible moment. Then he turned to the rest of the class and said, "Well, why aren't you all copying that down?" The lesson proceeded. They brewed a simple boil-cure potion, child's play for Harry, who'd been brewing compounds of vastly greater complexity since childhood. He completed his in half the allotted time, and it was perfect, the exact turquoise the textbook described, the precise consistency, the correct smell. Snape swept past his workstation, examined the potion, and said absolutely nothing. He didn't give Harry points, he didn't criticize. He simply looked at the flawless potion, looked at Harry, and moved on. It was, from Snape, the most significant compliment possible. After class, as students filed out, Snape's voice cut through the noise. "Addams, Potter, stay." Ron gave Harry a worried look. Harry waved him on and turned to face the potion's master. The dungeon was empty now, except for the two of them. Snape stood at his desk, arms folded, and studied Harry with an expression that had shifted from hostility to something more complex. Hostility was still there, but tangled with confusion, resentment, and something that looked uncomfortably like pain. "You are not," Snape said slowly. "What I expected. I get that a lot. Your father was an arrogant, bullying towerag who coasted on natural talent and family money." Harry didn't flinch. I've also heard he was brave, loyal, and died protecting his wife and child. People are complicated, Professor." Snape's jaw tightened. "Don't presume to lecture me about your father." "I'm not lecturing, I'm observing." Harry kept his voice calm, steady, Wednesday calm, the kind that didn't rise to provocation. "You hated him, that's clear. You're looking at me and seeing him, which is understandable. I look like him, but I'm not him, Professor. I'm an Addams." Something flickered across Snape's face. "The Addams family, I've heard stories. Most of them are true. They practice dark magic. They practice magic. The darkness is a matter of perspective." Harry met Snape's gaze squarely. "Professor, you tried to read my mind at the feast. Don't do it again." "My sister installed mental defenses that will give you a migraine for a week if they're triggered, and I'd rather not explain to her why I let someone pass them." Snape's expression froze. Then, slowly, one corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile. Snape didn't smile. But it was the ghost of one, the phantom of amusement in a man who'd forgotten what it felt like. "You have your mother's eyes," Snape said, and his voice was different now, raw, stripped of performance, the voice of a man saying something he couldn't help saying. "I know," Harry said softly. "I've been told." They looked at each other, two people connected by a dead woman's memory, separated by everything else. "Go," Snape said, "and Addams, Potter, the counterclockwise modification to the draft of living death. You're correct, Jigger is wrong." A pause. "Don't tell anyone I said that. Your secret is safe, Professor." Harry left the dungeons and walked through the castle corridors, feeling the ancient stones hum beneath his feet. The castle was alive around him, portraits chattering, ghosts drifting, staircases shifting with the lazy malice of things that enjoyed watching first years get lost. he found Wednesday in the library. She was sitting at a table surrounded by books and surrounded by silence. The students at nearby tables had created a buffer zone of empty seats around her that was either conscious or instinctive. "How was your first week?" Harry asked, sitting across from her, informative. Wednesday closed her book. The Slytherin common room is underwater. The social hierarchy is entirely blood status based. There are 3 students who have already tried to intimidate me and one who's smart enough to be useful. Malfoy, Malfoy. She looked at Harry with those flat, dark eyes. He's not what he pretends to be. There's something underneath the performance, something scared. His father's shadow is enormous and Draco is drowning in it. Can you work with him? I can work with anyone. The question is whether he's worth the investment. She paused. How's Snape? Complicated. He hated my father. He loved my mother. He tried to read my mind. I shut him down and we had a moment over potion recipes. A moment. A human moment. He's not a bad person, Wednesday. He's a damaged person. There's a difference. There's a theoretical difference. In practice, damaged people cause the most harm, so do undamaged ones. Dumbledore isn't damaged and he left a baby on a doorstep in November. Wednesday conceded the point with a tilt of her head. Speaking of Dumbledore, he's been watching you. I've been monitoring the castle's ward network, and there are surveillance charms keyed to your magical signature. He knows where you are at all times. That's expected. It's also illegal, but British magical law has more holes than substance. I've written to Father's legal team. Already. I wrote them on day 1. We should have a response by Monday. Additionally, she leaned forward slightly. The 3rd floor corridor, I went last night. Of course you did. There's a locked door. Behind the locked door is a 3-headed dog. Harry blinked. A Cerberus. A juvenile one, approximately 8 feet at the shoulder. It's standing on a trapdoor. It's guarding something. And you know this because I opened the door, looked at the dog, assessed the situation, and left. The dog was more frightened of me than I was of it, which was not at all. You went alone into a forbidden corridor, confronted a 3-headed dog, and scared it. It was a productive evening. Wednesday pulled a piece of parchment from her bag. I've started a file. The 3rd floor corridor, Dumbledore's surveillance network, Quirrell's turban. What about Quirrell's turban? It smells like death. Harry went still. Death as in something dead is in or near it, not the normal smell of fear and garlic that Quirrell wears like cologne, something else, something darker. Wednesday's eyes met his. I think there's something living in that turban, Harry, or something that was once alive and now exists in a state between life and death. Harry thought about this. He thought about the fragment in his scar, the soul piece, the Horcrux, the remnant of Voldemort that Morticia had spent 10 years containing. He thought about what his mother had told him about soul magic, about fragments, about the way a broken soul might cling to any anchor it could find. Voldemort, he said quietly, that's my working theory. On the back of a teacher's head, hidden in plain sight, in a school full of children, in a corridor that contains something he wants badly enough to possess a man to get close to. Wednesday's voice was flat, clinical. Dumbledore either doesn't know, which seems unlikely given his reputation, or he does know and is allowing it. Why would he allow it? A trap, bait, a test. Wednesday looked at him. A test for you, perhaps. Harry sat back. He felt the weight of it, the game being played around him, the pieces being moved, the adults who saw children as tools and schools as battlefields. It should have made him angry. It did make him angry in a cold, controlled way that Wednesday would have approved of. But mostly it made him determined. If it's a test, Harry said, then we'll pass it, on our terms, obviously. And we'll find out what's behind that trapdoor. I already know what's behind the trapdoor, I asked the dog. Off Harry's look, she added, I speak some Cerberus. Grandmama taught me. It's mostly growling and intent. The dog's name is Fluffy, which is an insult to a noble species, and he's guarding something that was brought here from a vault at Gringotts. The dog didn't know specifics. Dogs are loyal but uninformed, even 3-headed ones. Harry laughed. He couldn't help it. Here he was, 1 week into magical school, and his sister had already infiltrated the forbidden corridor, intimidated a mythological creature, and built a conspiracy file. I love you, Wednesday. I tolerate you more than most humans. In our family, that's the same thing. The week settled into a rhythm. Classes, meals, homework, exploration. Harry moved through Hogwarts like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples in every direction. In classes, he was extraordinary without being obnoxious about it. He had a knack for making excellence look effortless, which was itself a skill that Gomez had drilled into him. Never let them see you sweat, old man. Sweat is for the gymnasium. In public, everything is easy. He mastered every first-year charm on the first or second attempt. His transfiguration work was so far ahead of the curriculum that McGonagall started giving him independent study projects by the third week. His potions were consistently perfect, which Snape acknowledged through the subtle method of not criticizing them. His defense against the dark arts work was, well, Quirrell was a problem. Not because the man was a bad teacher. He was, in fact, a terrible teacher, stammering and flinching and conducting lessons with all the authority of a man being held at wand point. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was that every time Harry was near Quirrell, his scar prickled. It had never done that before. In 11 years of living with the Addams family, the sole fragment in his scar had been quiet, contained by Morticia's magic, sealed by Grandmama's wards, as inert as a prisoner in a deep cell. But in Quirrell's presence it stirred, it pressed against its bonds, it reached toward the turban. It's confirming your theory, Harry told Wednesday in the library. The fragment in my scar recognizes something in Quirrell, like calling to like. Soul fragment resonance, Wednesday said. The piece in you and the piece in him are trying to reconnect, which means whatever is in that turban is a larger portion, possibly the primary fragment, Voldemort's main soul, what's left of it. Harry rubbed his scar absently. Dumbledore has to know, of course Dumbledore knows. The question is what he's planning to do about it, and whether that plan involves you. Wednesday closed her book. I think the thing behind the trapdoor is bait, something Voldemort wants. Dumbledore is using it to draw him out and using you as the mechanism. The golden child walks into danger, faces the Dark Lord, fulfills his destiny. Harry's voice was dry, very storybook, very stupid. You're 11. I was 1 when I beat him last time. You didn't beat him. Your mother's sacrificial protection reflected his curse. You were a passive component, not an active participant. Wednesday's eyes were sharp. This time, if there's a confrontation, you won't be passive, and we won't be relying on anyone else's sacrifice. Agreed. I've written to Mother about the Quirrell situation. She's researching possession magic and methods of soul fragment extraction. She says she'll have a plan by Christmas. Christmas is 3 months away. Voldemort has waited 11 years. He can wait 3 more months, Wednesday stood. In the meantime, we gather information, we build alliances, and we let Dumbledore think his plan is working. And if something happens before Christmas, Wednesday looked at him. Then we improvise. We're Addamses. Improvisation is what we do best. She left the library. Harry sat alone for a moment, surrounded by books and candlelight, and the ancient silence of a castle that was watching him with warm, patient interest. He opened his bag and pulled out a letter that had arrived that morning, delivered by Thing, who'd climbed in through the dormitory window at 3 a.m. and deposited it on Harry's pillow with a proud little tap of his fingers. Dearest Harry, the letter began in Morticia's elegant, spidery handwriting. Your father has been fencing with the Kotrack again. He broke 3 antiques yesterday, a new record, even for him. Pugsley sends his love and a package that I have inspected and removed the detonators from. Grandmama is working on a project she refuses to explain, which means it's either very dangerous or very exciting or both. Miss greatly misses you. She asked me to tell you that the English house is ready for Christmas, should you want to visit. She's been practicing her screaming. She says she has a new range. Kitty Cat sleeps in your room. He won't let anyone else in. Lurch tried, and there was an incident. We've roof-ulstered. I am proud of you, Harry, not for your marks or your magic. Those are tools, not achievements. I am proud of you for being kind to a nervous boy on a train, for offering friendship to someone who was taught not to accept it, for looking a powerful man in the eye and not flinching. These are the things that matter. These are the things that make you ours. Be brave, be clever, be an Addams. All my love, Mother. P.S. Your father says, and I quote, "Tell old man Harry that if Dumbledore gives him any trouble, I'll come up there and challenge him to a duel. Swords, not wands. The man has 6 inches of reach on me, but I'm faster and better looking." I have not edited this for accuracy. Harry folded the letter carefully and put it in his inside pocket, close to his chest. He sat for a moment in the quiet library, surrounded by 1,000 years of accumulated knowledge, and missed his family with a sharp, sweet ache that was nothing like sadness and everything like love. Then he stood, squared his shoulders, and went to dinner. There was a mystery to solve, a dark lord to confront, and an entire magical world to shake up. He was Harry Addams Potter, and he was just getting started. The great hall was loud and bright and full of life. Harry slid into his seat between Ron and Hermione, across from Neville, who was telling a surprisingly animated story about a plant he'd discovered in Greenhouse 2 that responded to music. "It only likes minor keys, though," Neville said. "I tried a major scale and it tried to bite me." "You should meet my mother's plants," Harry said. "They're all in minor keys. One of them actually screams in B-flat. That's horrifying." "That's Tuesday." Ron snorted into his pumpkin juice. Hermione shook her head but was smiling. And across the great hall at the Slytherin table, Wednesday caught Harry's eye and raised her goblet a fraction of an inch. The game was on. The pieces were moving. And somewhere in the castle, behind a locked door on the 3rd floor, a 3-headed dog named Fluffy stood guard over a secret that would bring everything to a head before the year was out. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, there was food and friends and the warm, noisy, imperfect joy of belonging. Harry ate his dinner, laughed at Ron's jokes, debated magical theory with Hermione, encouraged Neville's growing confidence, and felt with a deep and settled certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, an Addams in a castle with a mystery to solve and a darkness to face. He couldn't wait. Chapter 3. The 3rd floor corridor. October came to Hogwarts like a guest who'd been drinking before the party, bold, colorful, and slightly unsteady. The trees in the forbidden forest turned shades of red and gold that clashed magnificently with the castle's gray stone, and the air took on the crisp, biting quality that Harry associated with home, not the temperature, which was considerably warmer than grandmother's preferred thermostat setting of hypothermic, but the feeling, the sense of things changing, things moving in the dark. Harry was in the library when the rumors started. He was always in the library now, or so it seemed. Not because he needed to study. His classwork was handled with an efficiency that left his evenings free. But because the library was where information lived, and information was the only currency that mattered in the game being played around him. He'd staked out a table in the back corner, near the restricted section, where the books occasionally whispered and the shadows were thick enough to provide cover. Wednesday approved of the location. She said it had tactical integrity, which was Wednesday for good sightlines and multiple exits. The rumor came via Hermione, who arrived at his table with her arms full of books and her expression full of purpose. "Someone broke into Gringotts," she said, dropping the books and sitting down with the focused energy of a terrier that had found a scent. Harry looked up from Most Potent Potions, which he was reading for pleasure and which the librarian, Madame Pince, had tried to confiscate 3 times. "When, July 31st, the day you were in Diagon Alley, it's in the Daily Prophet, the vault was emptied the same day before the break-in. Vault 713. She slid the newspaper across the table. Harry read the article. It was short on detail. Gringotts was not forthcoming about security failures, but the timing was unmistakable. The vault had been emptied hours before someone tried to break in. Whatever had been in that vault was now somewhere else, behind a trapdoor on the 3rd floor, guarded by a 3-headed dog named Fluffy. Harry would have bet his wand on it. Hagrid, Harry said. He was at Gringotts on July 31st. "I saw him in Diagon Alley. He was running errands for Dumbledore." "How do you know that?" "Because Hagrid is the only person I've ever met who is physically incapable of keeping a secret." He told me he was on official Hogwarts business within 5 minutes of meeting me at the boats. He also told me he'd been to a top security vault, and that what was inside was between Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. Hermione's eyes widened. He told you that. He told me the first part. The Nicholas Flamel bit slipped out when I asked a follow-up question, and he spent the next 10 minutes trying to unsay it. Hagrid is a wonderful person and a catastrophic security risk. Nicholas Flamel. Hermione was already reaching for one of her books. I know that name. I've read it somewhere. He's an alchemist, 665 years old or thereabouts. He created the Philosopher's Stone, the only known source of the elixir of life. Turns any metal to gold, produces a potion that makes the drinker immortal. Harry said this the way he might recite a grocery list. Grandmama met him once in 1923. She said he was pleasant but repetitive, which after 6 centuries seems fair. Hermione stared at him. You already knew what was behind the trapdoor, I suspected. Wednesday confirmed. The timeline fits. Dumbledore moved the stone from Gringotts to Hogwarts because someone was trying to steal it. The break-in on July 31st was someone arriving too late, someone possessing the back of our defense against the dark arts teacher's head. Hermione went very still. She had not been told about the Quirrell situation in full. Harry and Wednesday had been careful about how much they shared, not out of distrust but out of caution. Hermione was brilliant, but she was also 11 and had been raised in a world where teachers were authority figures and Dark Lords were storybook villains. The gap between those two worldviews was significant, but Hermione was also Hermione, and she'd been putting pieces together on her own. I knew something was wrong with him, she said quietly. He flinches when he looks at you. No, he flinches when the back of his head is pointed at you. It's subtle, but if you watch the pattern of how he moves in class, he's always positioning the turban away from you. As if something in it reacts to your presence. Harry regarded her with genuine admiration. How long have you been watching his movement patterns? Since the 2nd week. Wednesday mentioned the turban smelled wrong, and I started observing. She met his gaze steadily. I'm not just good at books, Harry. I notice things. I know you do. It's one of the reasons I trust you. Something shifted in Hermione's expression, a softening, a warmth, the look of someone who'd been valued for her mind so often that being valued for her awareness caught her off guard. So what do? She asked. For now, we watch, we gather, we wait for Wednesday's information to come together. She has a plan, she always has a plan. In the meantime, we have a more immediate problem. Which is, I have Quidditch tryouts in an hour and I've never ridden a broom. This was not entirely accurate. Harry had ridden a broom once when he was 7. Pugsley had borrowed a broom from a wizarding shop during a family vacation in Salem, and Harry had taken it for a spin around the estate at roughly 100 miles per hour, terrifying the bats, delighting Gomez, and prompting Morticia to declare that flying broomsticks were the motorcycles of the magical world, appealing to a certain type and inevitably fatal. Harry had not ridden a broom since, but he remembered the feeling, the rush, the freedom, the absolute joy of being unbound from the ground. He'd loved it. He'd loved it the way Gomez loved swordplay, instantly, completely, and with total disregard for personal safety. The Quidditch tryout was McGonagall's doing. She'd watched Harry during the first-year flying lesson 2 weeks ago, the one where Neville had fallen off his broom and broken his wrist, and Draco had stolen Neville's remembrall and taunted him with it. And Harry had done something that technically violated 3 school rules, and physically violated several laws of aerodynamics. He'd gotten on the broom without instruction, flown after Malfoy at top speed, and caught the remembrall 50 feet off the ground in a vertical dive that ended roughly 6 inches from the castle wall. McGonagall had been watching from her window. She'd come down to the pitch with an expression that combined fury and exhilaration in a way that Harry found deeply relatable. And instead of giving him detention, she'd introduced him to Oliver Wood, the Gryffindor Quidditch captain, who'd looked at Harry the way Gomez looked at a good sword. You want me to play Seeker, Harry had said, because it was obvious. You're a first year. First years haven't made house teams in a century. Then it's time to update the precedent. So here he was, on the Quidditch pitch, broom in hand. A Nimbus 2000 that McGonagall had somehow procured within 24 hours, facing Oliver Wood, who was explaining the rules of Quidditch with the manic intensity of a general briefing troops before an invasion. 4 balls, 3 chasers, 2 beaters, 1 keeper, and 1 seeker. That's you. The seeker's job is to catch the golden snitch. The snitch is worth 150 points and ends the game. You catch it, we win. Simple. What if the other seeker catches it? Then we lose and I drown myself in the lake. Any questions? Is the lake deep enough? Wood stared at him for a moment, decided it was a joke, and laughed nervously. Harry hadn't been joking. It was a genuine logistical question, but he let it pass. They practiced. Wood released the snitch and timed how long it took Harry to catch it. The first time, 47 seconds. The second time, 31. The third time, 19. By the 5th release, Harry was catching it almost before it had finished accelerating, reading the snitch's movement patterns the way he raid people. Instinctively, intuitively, finding the feint within the flight and cutting through to where it would be rather than where it was. Merlin's beard. Wood breathed after the 7th catch. Where did you learn to fly like that? I didn't, I just feel it. Harry hovered 20 feet up, the snitch buzzing irritably in his fist. The broom responds to intent. The snitch has behavioral patterns, it's just reading and reacting. Most people take years to develop that kind of spatial awareness. Most people weren't trained by a family that considers dodging thrown knives an after-dinner activity. Wood, wisely, did not ask for elaboration. He told Harry he was on the team, shook his hand with the fervent gratitude of a man who'd been handed a winning lottery ticket, and went to tell McGonagall, who responded with the closest thing to a smile Harry had seen her produce. The news traveled through Hogwarts with the speed and subtlety of a forest fire. First-year seeker. Youngest in a century. Harry Addams Potter, the boy who lived, who was apparently good at everything he touched, which was either inspiring or infuriating depending on your house allegiance. Harry handled the attention the way Gomez had taught him, with grace, deflection, and the strategic deployment of charm. He praised his teammates. He credited McGonagall. He said he was looking forward to learning from more experienced players. Which was diplomatic and also false. Harry already knew he was the best flyer on the team and possibly in the school, and false modesty was just lying with better manners. Wednesday's assessment was, as always, more direct. Quidditch is a useful cover, she told him in the library. It gives you a public identity that isn't the boy who lived. People love athletes. Athletes get the benefit of the doubt. Use it. You think I need cover? I think Dumbledore is watching you, Quirrell is watching you, and half the school is watching you. The more they see a Quidditch player, the less they see what's underneath. What's underneath? Wednesday looked at him. And Addams. Halloween arrived with the particular energy that Hogwarts brought to holidays, overwhelmingly. The Great Hall was decorated with live bats, which Harry appreciated, having grown up with bats, and enormous pumpkins that had been carved into jack-o'-lanterns the size of small cars. The feast was legendary. Every conceivable sweet and savory dish, plates that refilled themselves, goblets that never emptied. Harry sat at the Gryffindor table between Ron and Neville, across from Hermione, and tried to enjoy the evening. But something was off. His scar had been prickling all day, not the sharp, stabbing pain he felt near Quirrell, but a low, steady throb like a toothache in his forehead. The soul fragment was agitated. It was Halloween. October 31st, the anniversary of his parents' death. He hadn't said anything about it. He wasn't sure what he'd say. The Addams family commemorated the date every year, not with grief but with celebration, the way they treated all encounters with death, as something to be honored, acknowledged, and occasionally toasted with very old wine. Morticia would light candles for James and Lily. Gomez would tell Harry stories about Gryffindor bravery, most of which were probably fabricated, but were excellent nonetheless. Wednesday would sit with him in comfortable silence and not say anything, because Wednesday understood that sometimes presence was more powerful than words. Here, at Hogwarts, he was surrounded by people who knew what this date meant, but didn't know he knew. And the false cheerfulness of the feast felt like wearing shoes that were slightly too tight. He was thinking about this, about his parents, about the night they died, about the man who'd killed them, and the piece of that man that lived behind his scar, when the doors of the great hall crashed open, and Professor Quirrell sprinted in, turban askew, face the color of old porridge. Troll. Quirrell screamed, "Troll in the dungeons!" He stopped in the middle of the hall, swaying, "Thought you ought to know." And he collapsed, the hall erupted. Screaming, shouting, students leaping to their feet, pure, undiluted panic, the kind that turned a room full of people into a room full of animals. Dumbledore fired a cannon blast from his wand and restored order with a voice like a whip crack, and the prefects began herding students toward their dormitories. Harry didn't move. He was watching Quirrell, who was lying on the floor in what appeared to be a dead faint. Except it wasn't. Harry could see it, the micro-movements, the controlled breathing, the way Quirrell's hand was positioned under his body rather than flung out naturally. The man was faking, and his scar was screaming. Not the dull throb of earlier, but a sharp, hot, insistent alarm, the fragment in his head pressing against its bonds with desperate urgency. It was pointing, reaching, not toward Quirrell, toward something else, somewhere that was up, the third floor. Harry looked across the great hall and found Wednesday. She was standing at the Slytherin table, still and composed amid the chaos, and she was looking at him. Their eyes met, and the wordless conversation happened in a heartbeat, Quirrell's faking. The troll is a distraction. He's going for the stone, third floor. Now, Harry turned to Ron. "I need you to do something." "What? We need to go to the dormitory. Hermione's not here." Ron blinked, looked around. "What? She's been in the bathroom all afternoon. She had a fight with Lavender Brown about something stupid, and she went to cry. She doesn't know about the troll." The color drained from Ron's face. "The troll is in the dungeons. The bathrooms are on the ground floor, between here and the dungeons." Harry grabbed Ron's arm. "Go get her." "Take Neville." "Where are you going?" "To do something stupid and necessary." "Go, now. Get Hermione somewhere safe." Ron wavered for exactly 1 second. Then his jaw set in a way that Harry recognized, the Weasley stubbornness, the thing that made them Gryffindors generation after generation. He grabbed Neville, who looked terrified but didn't hesitate, and the two of them peeled off from the crowd and headed for the ground floor bathrooms. Harry slipped into the chaos of the evacuating hall and disappeared. The corridors were madness, prefects shouting, students running, ghosts swooping through walls, some panicked, some delighted. Peeves, the poltergeist, was having the time of his afterlife, ricocheting off the ceiling, cackling about trolls. In the confusion, one 11-year-old boy in dark robes moving purposefully against the flow of traffic was invisible. Harry took the back stairs, a route he'd mapped in his first week, because Wednesday's first rule of any new environment was know every exit before you need one. He climbed fast, his wand in his hand, his senses stretched to their limits. He could feel the castle around him, alive and watchful, and he could feel something else, a trail like oil on water, the magical residue of someone who'd passed this way moments ago, Quirrell. Moving fast, heading for the third floor, Harry reached the third floor corridor and stopped. Wednesday was already there. She was standing in front of the locked door, arms folded, looking exactly as she always looked, composed, unreadable, completely in control. She'd gotten there before him, which meant she'd left the great hall before Quirrell's announcement, which meant she'd anticipated this. "You knew," Harry said. "I've been monitoring Quirrell's magical signature for 6 weeks. It spiked tonight, started building around sunset." Whatever's in his turban was excited, anticipating something. She glanced at the door. "Fluffy's been agitated all day. I checked on him this afternoon." "You check on the 3-headed dog regularly. He likes me. The left head is named Boris. The middle head is named Reginald. The right head doesn't have a name because Hagrid ran out of ideas, which tells you everything you need to know about Hagrid's planning capacity." Wednesday, focus. "I am focused." She turned to face him fully. Quirrell is coming. He has to get past the dog, and he'll have a plan for that. We can let him go through and follow, or we can stop him here. If we stop him here, we reveal what we know. Dumbledore's plan, whatever it is, stays intact and we lose our advantage. If we let him through, he might get the stone. He won't get it tonight. Harry was thinking fast, the way Wednesday had trained him to think, not in lines but in webs, seeing connections, possibilities, paths. There are protections beyond the dog. Dumbledore wouldn't rely on a single obstacle. Quirrell will hit resistance. He'll have to retreat and plan further. You're gambling. I'm calculating. Different thing. Wednesday studied him. What do you want to do? I want to see what's down there. Not tonight. Tonight we let Quirrell fail and learn from his attempt, but soon. We need to know what protections are in place, because when the time comes, we'll need to get through them ourselves. To get the stone before Quirrell does. To get the stone before Quirrell does, and to use it as leverage. Dumbledore wants the confrontation between me and Voldemort. Fine. But it happens on our terms, not his. Something shifted in the corridor. A footstep, distant but approaching. The trail of oily magic thickened in the air. He's coming, Wednesday said. Disillusionment, already done. She pulled a small vial from her sleeve and cracked it between her fingers. The contents, a mist the color of midnight, billowed out and wrapped around them like a cloak. Harry felt himself slide out of visibility, becoming part of the shadows, indistinguishable from the darkness of the corridor, Grandmama's work. Not a Hogwarts spell, something older, deeper, from the Addams family tradition. It didn't just make you invisible, it made you absent, a hole in the world's attention that the eye slid over without registering. They pressed against the wall and waited. Quirrell came around the corner 30 seconds later. He was alone, and he was different. The stammer was gone. The cringing posture was gone. He moved with a fluid, predatory grace that was completely unlike the trembling Professor Harry had watched in class for 2 months. His wand was out, and his face was set in an expression of cold determination, and the turban was moving. Not physically, not visibly, but magically. Harry could feel it, the way you could feel a bass note too low to hear. A presence, a pressure, a will that was not Quirrell's, pushing outward from beneath the purple fabric. Quirrell reached the door. He pulled something from his robes, a small wooden flute, barely 6 inches long, and began to play. The notes were simple, lilting, a lullaby stripped to its bare bones. From behind the door, Harry heard a sound that started as a growl and shifted, gradually, to a rumble that was almost a purr. The 3 heads were falling asleep. Quirrell opened the door and slipped inside. Harry heard the heavy thud of a massive body hitting the floor, fluffy, surrendering to the music, and then silence. He looked at Wednesday. She looked back. In the darkness, invisible, they held a conversation with their eyes, now, not yet. When soon, when we're ready, not before, they waited. 5 minutes, 10. The flute music continued, muffled by the door. Then it stopped, the door opened, and Quirrell emerged. He was sweating, and his expression had shifted from determination to frustration. Whatever was beyond the trapdoor had stopped him. He locked the door, shoved the flute back into his robes, and hurried away down the corridor. As he passed within 3 feet of Harry and Wednesday, Harry felt the turban's presence wash over him like a wave of cold water, and his scar blazed with pain so intense he nearly gasped. He didn't gasp. He'd been trained better than that. He clenched his jaw, breathed through his nose, and let the pain pass through him the way Wednesday had taught him to handle pain. Acknowledge it, accept it, release it. Quirrell disappeared around the corner. The corridor was empty. The darkness settled back into its natural state, still watchful, still alive, but no longer hostile. Wednesday touched Harry's arm. The contact released the invisibility mist, and they materialized in the corridor like ghosts deciding to be solid. "Your scar," she said. It wasn't a question. It reacted when he passed. The fragment and whatever's in his turban, they're connected, like magnets. How bad, not unmanageable. But if I get close to Quirrell, actually close in a confined space, it'll be worse. Wednesday filed this away the way she filed everything, precisely, permanently, with immediate analysis. We need Mother's research, the extraction plan. Christmas, Harry said. She said Christmas. Then we keep Quirrell away from the stone until Christmas. And we find out what protections Dumbledore has in place, because whatever stopped Quirrell tonight, we need to know if it'll stop us. Agreed. Harry touched his scar. The pain was fading, settling back to the low throb that had been with him all day. Let's go. We need to find out what happened with the troll. What happened with the troll was that Ron Weasley and Neville Longbottom did something extraordinarily brave and slightly idiotic, which was the Gryffindor way. Harry got the story from Ron in the common room at midnight, after the school had been secured and the students sent to their dormitories. Ron was still buzzing with adrenaline, his freckles standing out against a face that was simultaneously pale with residual fear and flushed with excitement. "It was in the bathroom," Ron said, talking fast. "The girls' bathroom on the ground floor. We heard Hermione scream, and Neville wanted to go get a teacher, but there wasn't time. The troll was right there, Harry. I could see it through the door. 12 feet tall, gray, stupid-looking, carrying a club the size of a tree. What did you do?" I panicked. "Obviously." But then Ron looked at Neville, who was sitting in an armchair with a cup of tea and the expression of someone who was still processing reality. Neville threw a sink at it. Harry turned to Neville. "You threw a sink." I didn't mean to," Neville stammered. "I mean I did, but I didn't plan to. It was going to hit Hermione, and I got so angry that something just happened." The sink ripped out of the wall and hit the troll in the face. "Accidental magic," Harry said. "Under extreme emotional stress. Accidental magic that knocked a mountain troll sideways," Ron corrected, grinning. "Then, while it was stunned, I used Wingardium Leviosa on its club. Which, by the way, Hermione, the swish and flick thing works exactly like you said, and dropped it on the troll's head. Knocked it clean out." Hermione, who was sitting wrapped in a blanket with her hair even bigger than usual, made a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sob. "They saved my life." "You'd have done the same," Ron said, with a casual certainty that was more generous than he knew. "I wouldn't have thought of the levitation charm. I wouldn't have thought of anything if Neville hadn't bought me time. He's the hero here. He threw a sink at a troll." Neville went crimson. "It wasn't, I didn't, Neville," Harry said, and his voice was warm but firm, the voice he used when he wanted someone to hear something important. "Wednesday told you on the train that your magic was strong, stronger than you knew. Tonight you proved it. A 12-foot mountain troll was about to kill someone you cared about, and your magic responded with enough force to rip plumbing out of a stone wall and weaponize it. That's not accidental. That's instinct." The common room was quiet. The fire crackled. Neville looked at Harry with eyes that were bright and uncertain and desperately wanting to believe. "You're powerful, Neville," Harry said. "And tonight you were brave. Those two things together, that's what a Gryffindor is." Neville didn't say anything, but he sat up straighter. He held his teacup with steadier hands, and something in his face shifted, not dramatically, not all at once, but like a door opening a crack to let light through. 10 points to Gryffindor," Harry said, because someone ought to, even if he didn't have the authority. "Each. For sheer, stupid, magnificent bravery." Ron grinned. Hermione wiped her eyes. Neville managed a shaky smile. And somewhere in the castle, a very old man in a very tall tower sat at his desk and stared at a collection of silver instruments that were telling him things he didn't expect. The Potter boy was supposed to be isolated, vulnerable, alone. Instead, he was building a network, making allies, displaying power and confidence and a social intelligence that an abused, neglected child simply should not possess. Albus Dumbledore stroked his beard and, for the first time in many years, felt the uncomfortable sensation of a plan going sideways. The days after Halloween brought two significant developments. The first was that Hermione Granger became, officially and irrevocably, part of Harry's inner circle. The troll incident had burned away the last barriers of social awkwardness and academic rivalry, replacing them with the simple, powerful bond that comes from shared danger. She, Ron, Neville, and Harry were a unit now, not a clique, not a study group, but something more fundamental. People who had each other's backs. Wednesday approved. "Granger is the most intelligent person in your year," she told Harry during one of their library sessions. Possibly in the school, staff included. Weasley has tactical instincts he doesn't know how to use yet, and a loyalty that borders on pathological, which is useful. Longbottom is a sleeper. His potential is enormous and he's beginning to access it. You've assembled a good team. They're my friends, Wednesday, not my team. In our family, those are the same thing. She wasn't wrong. The second development was Quidditch. Harry's first match was Gryffindor versus Slytherin in early November, and the school's anticipation had been building like pressure in a sealed container. Harry had been training with Wood 3 evenings a week, and while the Gryffindor captain's intensity bordered on religious fervor, the sessions were productive. Harry's flying instincts were sharp, and the Nimbus 2000 responded to him with the eager precision of a well-made blade. The morning of the match, Harry came down to breakfast and found a long, thin package at his place. No note, no sender, just a broom-shaped parcel wrapped in brown paper that radiated the faint, complicated magic of someone who was trying to be anonymous and not quite managing it. He opened it. Inside was a Nimbus 2000, identical to the one McGonagall had given him. "You already have a Nimbus," Ron said, confused. "I do." Harry turned the broom over, running his fingers along the handle. He could feel enchantments layered into the wood, not the standard performance charms that came with the broom, but additional work. Subtle, sophisticated, the kind of modification that required either deep expertise or significant resources. He looked up at the staff table. Dumbledore was eating porridge with the serene concentration of a man who wasn't watching an 11-year-old examine a broomstick. He was watching, of course. Harry could feel the attention like a hand on his shoulder. "It's from Dumbledore," Harry said quietly. "How do you know?" Hermione asked. "Because it's exactly the kind of thing he'd do, a gift with no name, generous, thoughtful, designed to create gratitude and obligation without appearing to." He set the broom on the table. "I'll use the one McGonagall gave me. But what if this one's better? It might be. It's also compromised. Any broom that arrives anonymously with unknown enchantments goes through Wednesday before I ride it." He sent the broom to Wednesday via Thing, who scuttled across the great hall during breakfast, causing a minor sensation at the Hufflepuff table, and went to the match with his original Nimbus. The Quidditch pitch was a bowl of noise. The entire school had turned out, the stands a sea of red and gold on one side and green and silver on the other. Harry stood in the changing room with his team, listening to Wood's pre-match speech, which had the length and emotional intensity of a political address. "And remember, this isn't just a game. This is Gryffindor versus Slytherin. This is good versus evil. This is Oliver," Harry said mildly. "It's a sport. It's never just a sport." Harry decided not to press the point. He mounted his broom, flew out onto the pitch with his team, and felt the roar of the crowd hit him like a physical force. He loved it. The energy, the chaos, the sheer absurd joy of flying in front of hundreds of people who were screaming his name. It was like fencing with Gomez. The rush, the focus, the world narrowing to a single bright point of purpose. Madame Hooch blew her whistle. The balls were released. The game began. Harry climbed high above the pitch, the way Wood had coached him. Get altitude, survey the field, let the snitch come to you. Below, the game unfolded in a blur of speed and violence that he tracked with peripheral attention while his primary focus scanned for the snitch. The Gryffindor chasers were good. The Slytherin beaters were brutal. Fred and George Weasley were magnificent. They moved like a single organism, sending bludgers at opposing players with the casual accuracy of people who'd been hitting things in tandem since birth. The quaffle changed hands. Goals were scored. The commentary, provided by a Gryffindor student named Lee Jordan, was enthusiastic and wildly biased. Harry circled the pitch. No snitch. He could see the Slytherin seeker, Terrence Higgs, a fifth year with the lean build of a greyhound, tracking him from the opposite end of the field. And then his broom bucked. It was sudden and violent, a sharp jerk to the left that nearly unseated him, followed by a shudder that ran through the handle like a seizure. Harry gripped tighter, adjusted his weight, and the broom steadied for 3 seconds. Then it bucked again, harder, and this time it didn't stop. The broom began to vibrate, to twist, to fight him like a living thing trying to throw its rider. Harry clamped his legs around the handle and held on with both hands, his knuckles white, his teeth gritted. Someone was jinxing his broom. He could feel it, the external magic, a persistent, malicious force pressing against the broom's enchantments and trying to override them. It was strong, focused, the work of someone who knew what they were doing and had direct line of sight. Harry didn't panic. He'd been trained by a family that considered near-death experiences a recreational activity. Instead, he did what Wednesday had taught him to do in any situation where external forces were trying to control something he possessed. He pushed back, not with counter-curses, not with defensive charms. With raw, unstructured magic, the wild, instinctive power that lived in him like a second heartbeat, the power that had been levitating dynamite caps since he was 14 months old. He poured his will into the broom like water into a vessel, flooding the wood with his own magic, drowning out the foreign influence. The broom shuddered. The jinx pressed harder. Harry pushed harder. And somewhere in the stands, whoever was casting the jinx felt something push back through their connection. A surge of power that was not defensive but aggressive, not blocking but attacking, following the thread of malicious magic back to its source like a spark traveling along a fuse. The jinx broke. Harry's broom steadied instantly, snapping back to full responsiveness as though waking from a dream. He was sweating, breathing hard but in control, and he could see the snitch. It was hovering near the base of the Slytherin goalposts, a tiny golden blur barely visible against the green banners. Harry didn't hesitate. He flattened himself against the broom handle and dived. The world became a tunnel of speed and sound. The crowd roared. The wind screamed. Higgs saw Harry's dive and reacted, but he was too far away, too slow, too late. Harry's hand closed around the snitch 12 feet off the ground, and he pulled out of the dive with a sharp, exhilarating arc that left his stomach somewhere around his knees and his heart somewhere around his throat. The Gryffindor stands erupted. Lee Jordan was screaming into the megaphone. Fred and George were doing a victory lap that involved both of them standing on their brooms, which shouldn't have been possible. Ron was hugging Neville so hard that Neville's feet left the ground. Harry landed, held up the snitch, and grinned the kind of grin that could light fires in the stands. Hermione lowered the omnioculars she'd been using to scan the teachers' section. Her face was white. It was Snape, she told Ron as they pushed through the crowd toward the pitch. I watched him the whole time. He was staring at Harry's broom, not blinking, muttering. He was jinxing it. Snape, Ron's expression darkened. That greasy, but that's not all. Hermione grabbed his arm. Quirrell was doing the same thing. They were both muttering, both staring. One of them was jinxing and the other was counter-jinxing, and I can't tell which was which. They reached Harry on the pitch. He was being thumped on the back by teammates, but he extracted himself when he saw their faces. The broom, Hermione said. We saw, I know, I felt it. And I felt who was doing it. Harry kept his voice low. It was Quirrell. Snape was trying to counter it. How do you know? Because when I pushed back through the connection, I felt the turban. The jinx was coming from whatever's inside Quirrell, not from Quirrell himself. The entity, Voldemort, was trying to kill me with a broomstick malfunction in front of the entire school, and Snape was the one trying to stop it. Hermione processed this rapidly. Snape is protecting you. Snape made a promise to my mother. I don't know the details yet, but he's been watching Quirrell since the start of term. He's not our enemy. Harry paused. He's a deeply unpleasant man with terrible social skills who happens to be on the right side. The two things can coexist. I need to sit down, Ron said. You are sitting down. I need to sit down more. Harry found Wednesday after the match in the corridor outside the changing rooms. She was holding the broom Dumbledore had sent. Well, Harry asked. It's clean. No tracking charms, no compulsions, no hidden jinxes. The additional enchantments are all performance-related: speed, stability, responsiveness. It's a genuinely good broom with genuinely generous modifications. So Dumbledore just gave me a nice broom. Dumbledore gave you a gift that you would feel guilty refusing and grateful for accepting. That's how he operates, not through control but through obligation. You do something nice for someone, they feel indebted, and indebtedness is a leash that doesn't look like a leash. So I was right not to use it. You were right to be cautious, but the broom itself is safe. She held it out. Use it or don't, just know what it represents. Harry took the broom. He turned it over in his hands, beautiful craftsmanship, perfect balance, the subtle thrum of quality enchantment work. A generous gift from a dangerous old man. I'll use it, he decided. And I'll send Dumbledore a thank you note. A very polite, very warm thank you note that acknowledges the gift without accepting the obligation. Wednesday almost smiled. Almost. Gomez would be proud. Gomez would challenge Dumbledore to a fencing match. Gomez would challenge a hurricane to a fencing match. That's not a useful benchmark. November turned to December. The castle grew cold, frost climbing the windows like crystalline ivy, the grounds hardening to iron under a sky that couldn't decide between snow and merely threatening it. Harry moved through the weeks with the controlled energy of someone who was playing 3 games simultaneously and winning all of them. The schoolwork was effortless. He continued to excel in every subject, though he'd taken McGonagall's advice and dialed back slightly, not hiding his abilities but presenting them more casually, making the extraordinary look merely impressive. It was a performance, and he was good at it. The social game was more complex. His circle of close friends was solid. Ron, Hermione, Neville, and Wednesday formed a core that was becoming formidable. Ron's tactical brain was developing rapidly, especially through chess. He'd beaten every student in Gryffindor Tower and was working his way through Ravenclaw. Hermione was devouring knowledge at a rate that made the library jealous, and was increasingly comfortable challenging authority when the facts supported it. Neville was blooming, slowly, cautiously, but unmistakably, his confidence growing in herbology and spreading outward into other areas like a plant putting out new roots. And beyond the inner circle, Harry was building something wider. He was friendly without being false. He helped struggling students without condescension. He treated house rivalries as games rather than wars. He was, in the language that Gomez would have used, investing in relationships. The Weasley twins had become allies. Harry appreciated their particular brand of creative chaos, and they appreciated someone who could match their energy without flinching. Percy remained stiff but respectful. Dean Thomas and Seamus Finnegan, his doormates, had progressed from cautious to comfortable to genuinely fond, and Draco Malfoy was. Interesting. The Slytherin boy hadn't taken Harry up on his offer of friendship, not explicitly, not publicly, but something had shifted since the train. Draco's insults had become less frequent and less barbed. He still sneered at Ron, still looked down his nose at Hermione, still carried himself with the entitled swagger of old money and older prejudice. But when Harry caught his eye across the great hall or passed him in the corridors, there was a pause, a hesitation, a crack in the performance that suggested the boy underneath was thinking. Wednesday, operating from within Slytherin, was working on this. I sit next to him in potions. She told Harry. He's intelligent, genuinely intelligent, not just well-trained. His wand work is precise, his theoretical knowledge is extensive, and he has an instinct for magical manipulation that his father has been shaping for years. Shaping toward what? Toward being Lucius Malfoy's son. Toward blood purity ideology, political maneuvering, and the belief that power is inherited rather than earned. Draco is a project, his father's project, but projects can be redirected. Are you redirecting him? I'm exposing him to alternatives. I answer his questions honestly. I challenge his assumptions without attacking them. If you attack a belief, people cling tighter. If you simply present contrary evidence and let them wrestle with it, the belief weakens on its own. That's remarkably patient of you. I'm not patient, I'm strategic. There's a difference. She paused. He asked me about your family last week. What did you tell him? The truth. That we're wealthy, powerful, practice dark magic openly, and consider blood purity to be a quaint superstition held by people who confuse genetics with destiny. He didn't know what to do with that. Good. Confusion is the first step toward thinking. That's almost something Mother would say. Where do you think I learned it? The investigation into the third-floor corridor continued in parallel. Harry, Wednesday, Hermione, Ron, and Neville had collectively assembled a picture of the protections guarding the Philosopher's Stone, not through any single dramatic discovery, but through the patient, methodical intelligence gathering that Wednesday insisted was the only kind that doesn't get you killed. They knew about Fluffy. They knew about the trapdoor. Hagrid, bless his enormous, indiscreet heart, had been the primary source. Harry visited him regularly, partly because he genuinely liked the man, who was kind and warm and loved magical creatures with a passion that Harry found deeply relatable, and partly because Hagrid leaked information the way a sieve leaked water. Over several cups of tea and several plates of rock-hard biscuits, Harry had learned that Fluffy belonged to Hagrid, that the protections below the trapdoor had been contributed by various teachers, and that the whole thing was between Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. Hagrid said this every time, seemingly unaware that he'd already revealed the name. Hermione had done the academic work, cross-referencing the teacher's specialties with likely protection types. If each teacher contributed something, she reasoned, then we'd expect challenges related to their subjects. McGonagall Transfiguration, Flitwick Charms, Snape Potions, Sprout Herbology, Quirrell Defense, and Dumbledore himself, presumably, for the final protection. 6 challenges minimum, Wednesday calculated. 7 if Dumbledore's protection is separate from the stone itself. The question is whether they're designed to stop an intruder or to test one. What's the difference? Ron asked. A protection designed to stop someone is maximally difficult. A protection designed to test someone is calibrated to be passable by the right person. Wednesday's dark eyes found Harry. If Dumbledore wants Harry to reach the stone, the protections will be solvable by a first-year student, specifically by a first-year student with particular skills. That's insane, Ron said. You're saying Dumbledore designed the protections for Harry to get through. I'm saying it's possible. The man left a baby on a doorstep to be abused for 10 years as part of a long-term plan. Designing a gauntlet that an 11-year-old can navigate is well within his operational parameters. The compartment, they were meeting in the library, at Harry's usual table, went quiet. Ron looked uncomfortable. Hermione looked troubled. Neville looked like he was trying very hard to process the idea that the greatest wizard of the age might be manipulating children. We don't know that for certain, Hermione said carefully. We're speculating. We're hypothesizing based on evidence, Wednesday corrected. There's a difference. And the hypothesis will be tested when we go through the trapdoor. When? Ron's voice cracked slightly. Not if, when. Harry's voice was calm, certain. Quirrell is going to make another attempt at the stone. He's been quiet since Halloween, but the thing in his turban is getting stronger. I can feel it. My scar hurts more in his presence every week. Whatever Voldemort is planning, the timeline is accelerating. And when Quirrell goes for the stone, we go after him. On our terms, with our preparation, and with full knowledge of what we're walking into. Harry looked at each of them in turn. Nobody has to come. This isn't your fight. Shut up, Ron said. Harry blinked. I said shut up. You're not doing the noble this isn't your fight rubbish. You're my best mate. If you're going through a trapdoor to fight a Dark Lord, I'm coming with you, and if you try to stop me, he struggled for a sufficiently dramatic threat. I'll tell Fred and George where you sleep. I'm coming too, Hermione said. You need someone who's actually read the relevant textbooks. I've read them. You've read the supplementary textbooks. I've read the ones the teachers assigned, which are the ones the protections will be based on. She raised an eyebrow. It was a disturbingly Wednesday-like gesture. You need me, Harry? Neville? Harry asked. Neville was quiet for a moment. His hands were trembling slightly, the old nervousness, the residual habit of fear, but his eyes were steady. My parents fought Voldemort, he said. They fought him, and it cost them everything. They're alive, but they don't know who I am. They don't know who anyone is. His voice was rough. I'm not going to sit in the common room while their war continues and pretend I'm not part of it. The table was silent. Then Wednesday, who had been listening from behind a book, said, That was well spoken, Longbottom. Neville went pink. Thanks. Don't let it go to your head. You still need to work on your reflexes. How are my reflexes? He ducked as a book flew at his head from Wednesday's direction. What the? Improving, Wednesday said. One evening in mid-December, Harry was returning from the library alone. Wednesday had a Slytherin event she was required to attend, and the others had gone to bed when he turned a corner and found Albus Dumbledore standing in the corridor as though he'd been waiting there. Which, of course, he had. "Good evening, Harry," Dumbledore said, "Professor." Harry didn't break stride. He'd been expecting this, a direct approach, a personal conversation, the grandfather act at full power. It had taken Dumbledore longer than Wednesday had predicted, which she'd attributed to either caution or arrogance. "Might I walk with you? It's your castle, Professor." Dumbledore fell into step beside him, hands clasped behind his back, blue eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles. He was tall, taller than Harry had appreciated at a distance, and he radiated a controlled warmth that was designed to put people at ease the way a campfire was designed to draw travelers. "I must confess," Dumbledore said, "that you are not quite what I expected. I've heard that before." "I imagined so, when I left you at the Dursleys' home. You didn't leave me at the Dursleys' home, you left me on their doorstep in November with a letter." The correction landed softly but precisely, Dumbledore's twinkling dimmed by a fraction. "You know about that night." "I know everything about that night, Professor. I know you left me there because of blood wards tied to my mother's sacrifice, a protection anchored through her sister's bloodline. I know you believed the Dursleys would take me in, and that the wards would keep me safe from magical threats. I know you placed monitoring charms and tracking spells, all of which failed when my family took me home, and I know you've spent 10 years looking for me." They walked in silence for a moment. The corridor was empty, the portraits dozing in their frames, the torches flickering. "You are remarkably well informed," Dumbledore said. "I have a remarkable family. The Addams family." He said it the way one might say the weather, acknowledging its existence without revealing an opinion. "I'll confess I did not anticipate their involvement. I've made inquiries, of course." "I know, my mother has been monitoring your inquiries since I was 2, a pause. Longer this time. Harry felt the faintest flicker of something from Dumbledore, surprise, genuine surprise, controlled and concealed almost instantly, but there. "Your mother, Morticia Addams, a woman of considerable reputation. A woman of considerable everything. She asked me to give you a message, by the way." "Oh," she said, "tell him I know about the Horcruxes, all of them, and we have a plan that doesn't require my son's death. If he'd like to discuss it, he knows where to find us. If he'd prefer to continue treating an 11-year-old as a sacrificial chess piece, he should be aware that the Addams family has never lost a legal battle, a political conflict, or a war. We don't intend to start." The corridor was very quiet. Dumbledore had stopped walking. Harry stopped beside him and turned to face the old man, and for the first time he saw past the twinkle, past the grandfather act, past the benign eccentricity, past the carefully constructed persona of a kindly old wizard who only wanted the best. Underneath all of that was a man who was, very briefly, afraid, not of Harry, not of the Addams family, but of the possibility that he was wrong. That the plan he'd spent a decade building, the careful, calculated, necessary plan to destroy Voldemort, might not be the only plan. That someone else might have found a better way, and that the better way might mean that everything he'd done, every manipulation, every sacrifice, every cold decision made for the greater good, had been unnecessary. "Horcruxes," Dumbledore said softly. "She knows. She's known for years. The soul fragment in my scar, she identified it when I was a baby. She's been containing it since then and researching extraction methods since before I could walk. Extraction is extremely dangerous. The soul fragment is deeply embedded in scar tissue formed by an Avada Kedavra rebound, anchored by a prophetic connection and sustained by the residual energy of my mother's sacrifice. Yes, Morticia has written a paper on it. Would you like a copy?" Dumbledore stared at him. Harry stared back, green eyes met blue, and neither flinched. Harry, Dumbledore said, and his voice was different now, stripped of performance, genuine in a way that Harry hadn't heard from him before. I must ask you to understand, when your parents died, when Voldemort fell, I was faced with a terrible choice. The prophecy connects me to Voldemort. I know, neither can live while the other survives. My mother explained the prophecy when I was 8. She also pointed out that prophecies are interpretive, not prescriptive, and that neither can live while the other survives has at least 6 possible meanings, only one of which involves my death. Another silence. The torches flickered. A portrait snored. You are. Dumbledore began and stopped. He took off his spectacles, cleaned them on his robe, and put them back on, a human gesture, small and real, that made him look less like a legend and more like a very old, very tired man. You are not the boy I planned for. No, I'm the boy my family raised. And with respect, Professor, I'm better for it. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Then, remarkably, he laughed. It was a quiet laugh, rueful and genuine, and it transformed his face. Your mother, he said, she's quite something. She's an Addams, they all are. I'm beginning to understand that. Dumbledore's eyes met his again, and this time the twinkle was different, warmer, more authentic, tinged with something that might have been respect. Very well, Harry. I would like to see Morticia's research. I would like to discuss her extraction plan. And I would like to, he hesitated, and for the first time Albus Dumbledore looked uncertain. I would like to consider the possibility that I was wrong. That's all we're asking. It's quite a lot, actually. I've been certain of my approach for a decade. Certainty is difficult to abandon. My father says certainty is just arrogance wearing a nicer hat. Your father sounds completely insane. He is. He's also the wisest person I know in his own way. Wisdom doesn't have to be solemn, Professor. Dumbledore smiled. It was a real smile, complicated, surprised, and carrying the weight of a man who was realizing that the world was larger than his plans. I shall write to your mother, he said. And Harry, I owe you an apology, not just for the doorstep, for everything I assumed about what you'd need to be. Harry considered this. He could be gracious. He could be magnanimous. He could accept the apology with the smooth diplomacy that Morticia had modeled, but he was also Gomez's son, and Gomez believed in honesty the way other people believed in gravity. You owe me more than an apology, Professor. You owe me the truth about the stone, about Quirrell, about what's really happening in this school, but that's a conversation for another night. He straightened his robes. Right now, I need to sleep. I have a transfiguration essay due tomorrow, and McGonagall is scarier than you are. Dumbledore laughed again, louder this time, startled out of him. She is, isn't she? Good night, Professor. Good night, Harry. Harry walked away. He didn't look back, not because he didn't want to, but because he'd learned from Morticia that the most powerful exit was the one that didn't check for approval. Behind him, Albus Dumbledore stood in an empty corridor and felt, for the first time in a very long time, the peculiar vertigo of hope. The next morning, Harry sent a letter home. Dear Mother, I delivered your message. He listened. I think he might actually be a good man underneath it all, misguided, arrogant, too certain of his own judgment, but good. He looked genuinely shaken when I mentioned the extraction plan. I think he's been carrying the weight of Harry has to die for 10 years, and the possibility that it isn't true hit him harder than I expected. He's going to write to you. Be gentle with him. Or don't. Your judgment is better than mine in these things. Quirrell's getting worse. My scar hurts almost constantly now when I'm near him, and I've started having dreams, not nightmares exactly, more like fragments, images that don't belong to me. A dark room. A mirror, something that wants to be free. I think Voldemort is going to make his move soon. Wednesday says to tell you that she's identified 6 protections below the trapdoor and has countermeasures for 4 of them. She needs more information on the other 2. She also says the Slytherin common room has a mold problem that she's quite fond of. I miss you. I miss Father. I miss Pugsley and Grandmama and Lurch and Thing and Kitty Cat and even the bats. Tell Father I love him. Tell him not to break any more antiques. Tell him I can't wait for Christmas. Your son, Harry. He folded the letter and gave it to Thing, who tucked it inside himself. Wherever inside was, for a disembodied hand, and scuttled off into the castle's walls with the practiced ease of someone who'd been navigating buildings' internal structures for decades. Harry watched him go, then headed down to breakfast. He had 3 weeks until Christmas. 3 weeks until his family arrived. 3 weeks until Morticia could look Dumbledore in the eye and explain, in that cool, precise, devastating way of hers, exactly how they were going to save her son's life without sacrificing it. 3 weeks until the Addams family descended upon Hogwarts. The castle, Harry thought, had absolutely no idea what was coming. He grinned, neither did Dumbledore. Chapter 4. Family Business. The Addams family arrived at Hogwarts on December 23rd in a manner that the castle would not soon forget. Harry was in the entrance hall when he heard it, a sound like thunder being personally offended, rolling across the grounds from the direction of the front gates. He was sitting on a stone bench near the doors, pretending to read a Transfiguration text while actually waiting, because Thing had delivered a message at dawn that consisted of a single word in Morticia's handwriting. Today. Ron was with him because Ron had refused to go home for Christmas once he'd learned that Harry's family was coming. "I have to see this," he'd said, with the expression of a man booking